On my 20th birthday, my mom said, "Time to man up and move out." They kicked me out with the cruelest message, so I'd make her pay for every word. My mom splashed cold water on my face on my 20th birthday. It's time to man up and move out. I woke up to see my stepdad beside my belongings at the doorway. They've always been cruel, but I never expected this. "But I'm your son," my mom mused. My stepdad nodded approval. "You've been nothing but a burden since your dad died, wasting our money on therapy, crying about nightmares. We kept you fed and housed for 20 years, that's more than most would do." They put my things into my arms and forced me out the door before I could grasp what was happening. I avoided fighting. I think part of me gave up. I arrived at a city homeless shelter after hours of meditation and cuddling stray kittens. I trembled while filling out intake paperwork. Then my phone buzzed. I was unblocked by my parents to deepen the knife. My stepfather said, "At least your dad had the decency to die in Afghanistan." Face palm emoji. I broke down on that plastic chair, broken down crying. This exhausted counselor stroked my shoulder. "Honey, what's wrong?" I showed her texts. She glanced at my intake form while reading. Her entire body stiffened. "Wait." Her voice seemed odd. "Jackson Brooks, your father died in Afghanistan." "Yeah." I managed. "When I was 7, she grasped her desk. "Did you ever see the body? Attend a burial?" I gasped. "Excuse me, Liam. Did anyone from the military ever visit after checking on you?" Not really. "No, I don't know." "Wait, why are you asking me this?" The Chromebook clicked in her palms. Her face turned white after 1 minute. "Liam, your father didn't die in Afghanistan." Chest constricted. "What?" "He's at Palmer V, a psychiatric ward. He's been there for 10 years? Suddenly fluorescent lights were too bright. "That's impossible. We had a funeral. I went to grief therapy for years." She stared me in the eye. "You need to see your father today before your parents realize you know." Suddenly small things fit. What made mom worried about military families on TV? Why we moved states after the funeral? I wanted to cry, but my stepdad's words about my being young kept playing in my thoughts. Instead, I breathed deeply and said, "Why today?" "Because when, not if, when, your parents find out you know your dad is alive, they'll know someone is after their benefits." She drove me to Palmer. The whole voyage, my head rejected what was happening. After entering the VA hospital, we proceeded down a long corridor that smelled like floor wax and pharmaceuticals. My father was there. Not my stepdad who beat me, or my mom's other hidden boyfriends who used old vinyls to seduce me. My loving father. "Dad?" A weak word. His face crumbled as he turned. "Liam. They told me I'd never see you again. They told me you hated me. I thought you were dead." Hard to breathe. "I went to your funeral. Mom said you died a hero." Pain twisted his face. "They told me you knew the truth and chose them." I received a notice on my phone as my brain was dissociating. My parents drained my college funds, birthday money, and everything else as I learned my life was a lie. Account closed. Dad viewed my phone screen after I dropped it on the floor. "All my combat pay went to you," he whispered. "Every month for 10 years for your future. I never saw a penny." A doctor entered. "Mr. Brooks has been ready for discharge for years, but he's disabled from the war. He needs family to release him to someone who will take care of him." "I'll do it," I answered instantly. "I'll take care of him." The next morning was surreal. Dad left wearing regular clothes, pants, and a loose flannel. His respiration shallowed as we approached my mom and stepdad's house. 10 years, Dad muttered. 10 years they stole from us." We stopped at the front door, where they'd shoved me out yesterday. Footsteps entered. The deadbolt turned. The door opened. We saw my stepdad. I almost chuckled at its fast plunge. He saw a corpse on his doorstep. Mom emerged behind him and dropped her coffee mug, shattering it. Daddy grinned. "Hello, David. We need to talk about my death benefits. Play 90 seconds and give me 5 stars on Spotify. My Instagram gift for those who accomplished this and presented proof. The 4 winners can choose a Spotify or Amazon gift card." David's face changed 5 times in 3 seconds. After the shock, he did this strange computation to verify this. His cheeks went crimson with wrath. Mom choked and dropped her coffee mug. Smashing the wooden floor, it erupted. Entryway white tile was stained with brown coffee. It cracking sounded beautiful, like their falsehoods were shattering with the pottery. David immediately shouted that we couldn't just show up. He added, "We were trespassing and making crazy accusations." growing louder. Mom changed tactics. Quickly, which would be remarkable if she weren't unwell. Her entire face softened in worry. She inquired if Dad was taking his pills with phony anxious eyes. She suspected he was puzzled about what transpired. She spoke gently like a bewildered child. I felt my hand reach my pocket before I did it. I launched the camera app on my phone. I kept it low by my side but tilted up to capture everything with the microphone. I kept my expression neutral and let them chat. David pushed forward after 30 seconds when his eyes focused on my phone. Hand extended to grasp it. Dad stood between us despite his shaking hands, which I could see from where I stood. David paused. He peered beyond Dad to a neighbor receiving mail along the street. He backed up as his expression altered again. I kept recording. Instead, Mom suggested we sit down and discuss calmly inside. Dad's breathing altered. Fast and shallow. I noticed his chest moving too fast. I remembered his glazed eyes from the hospital. He was deteriorating. I decided then. We came to say we'd stay. The message arrived. I told Dad we were going by touching his arm. He nodded but didn't speak. We turned and returned to the car. I felt Mom and David watching us from the doorway. Dad glanced at his hands when I put him in the passenger seat. Still shaking. I sat in the driver's seat contemplating my next move. A shelter counselor gave me her direct number, I realized. I phoned to tell her what occurred. Not wasting time with queries. She offered a one-night lodging voucher from an emergency fund. I was given the address and told to find the manager. I hung up after thanking her. Dad was still. He kept staring at his hands like they belonged to someone else. Start the car and go to the motel. It took 25 minutes. Dad didn't finish speaking. Being the only thing between him and collapse weighed on me like a boulder. The Sunset Inn Motel had a parking lot and a roadway. But no sunset view. We received room 107 keys from the management without any communication. Old cigarettes and cleaning spray filled the room. 2 brown-covered mattresses and a scratched desk beside the window. So I spread everything on the desk. Palmer discharge papers for Dad. Birth certificate I stole from my room before they kicked me out. Mom and David messaging screenshots. Bank notification regarding depleted account. I arranged it in rows. Though little, arranging it helped me feel less drowning. I photographed everything on my phone. I dialed the bank notification number from the bed edge. The fraud department held me for 10 minutes. Finally, someone answered. Explaining the problem. The salesperson informed my college savings account closed yesterday morning. All the money went to an account I couldn't access. She suggested reporting it to the police. I'd require proof the money was mine. She lowered her voice when I asked how to show that while I'm homeless and barely surviving. She acknowledged the difficulty, but these were the necessities. She gave me a case number and told to call after getting the police report. I scribbled the number on the hotel pad. My hand shook. Dad talked for the first time since leaving home. Upon enlisting, he established an allotment, directly supporting his family with war pay. He didn't grasp its technicalities. He wanted us taken care of case something happened to him. His guilt-laden speech made my throat tighten. He stated he assumed I was getting money for college all along. I said I never saw it. Putting his face in his hands. Something shattered me seeing that. This veteran was imprisoned for 10 years and lost his son. Feeling bad since he attempted to help me and it was taken. I wanted to improve it but couldn't find words. I sat on the bed with him till his breathing settled. Next, I backed up my phone to the cloud for an hour. The shelter counselor taught me documentation was key when confronting better-resourced opponents. I named a folder evidence. I submitted screenshots of every paragraph, the porch voice recording, and every desk document. I preserved everything in 3 locations. Smartphone storage, Google Drive, email drafts. Whether my phone died, was stolen, or Mom and David deleted it, I wouldn't lose this. Every snapshot felt somewhat protective. They couldn't accept my backed-up files. We traveled back to Palmer, Virginia the next morning. Dad required an address-updated ID. We required his benefits history prints. A 50-year-old lady with chained reading glasses was the discharge coordinator. She was helpful but moved like a paper processor all day. She 2-finger typed Dad's responses. He signed forms she printed. She estimated 3 weeks for ID processing. The benefits history would be ready this afternoon. I exercised patience in the plastic chair. My head was screaming that we needed answers faster, that Mom and David might be concealing money or deleting documents every day, but I stayed quiet and waited. The coordinator finalized the forms and provided us a number to call for prints this afternoon. We departed after thanking her. Dad stated he was fatigued in the car. I took us to the hotel. He fell asleep quickly on a bed. Sitting at the desk, I viewed the ordered materials. First steps were taken. We challenged them. We began documenting everything. We started reclaiming Dad's identity. It wasn't enough. Though insufficient, it was something. Something was more than 3 days ago when I woke up to cold water on my face. The next morning, I searched the documents for the VA benefits number and called it. I was transferred 4 times before landing in a wait with 1987-style hold music after pressing department numbers in the automated system. While organizing paperwork, I set the phone on speaker on the desk. 25 minutes passed, then 50. I listened to the same 30-second elevator music loop as Dad woke up and went to the restroom. Finally, a woman requested Dad's SSN, read it from discharge papers. After asking for aid, I mumbled my explanation of representative payees and power of attorney. She was patient and began over. She explained that a representative payee manages benefits for someone who can't. They must apply and be authorized by the VA. She mentioned someone had received Dad's benefits under that arrangement for years. I inquired who, and she claimed she couldn't give me that information over the phone without permission. I felt silly for not knowing her acronyms, POA, RP, VARO, and other unfamiliar terms. My shaky fingers made my writing untidy as I grabbed the hotel notepad to write everything down. She explained that changing a representative payee required me to complete documents and Dad to be examined. After an hour of talking, my brain was full of facts I hardly comprehended. I informed the shelter counselor of the VA call. She wanted to link me with Adult Protective Services because my parents may have exploited a handicapped veteran financially. I hesitated. Mom taught me for years that government agencies were traps that made things worse and couldn't be trusted. The counselor must have heard my quiet since she remarked the system is sometimes your only defense. I considered how the system had found Dad before I knew to look. With no money or house, I couldn't fight Mom and David alone. Okay, I said. She gave me a number and told me to call Lucas Gray. He was skilled at handling problems like these, she remarked. I jotted down her details and thanked her. Before that call, I attempted something else. I found family numbers I hardly remembered on my phone contacts. Pre-state move-aunts, uncles and cousins. Many numbers were disconnected. I left 3 voicemails outlining what occurred and asking whether they spoke to me. 2 rings went unanswered. I nicknamed my mother's sister, Aunt Lisa. On the 4th ring, she answered. She interrupted me as I introduced myself. My mother had told her I was lying to make them appear terrible. She refused to become engaged in family issues. I told her Dad was living, but she interrupted. She told me to be grateful instead of generating difficulty because Mom had lost her husband and raised me alone. Then she hung up. I sat looking at my phone. Mom seems to have isolated herself for years to avoid anyone who may challenge her tale or support me if I discovered out. After Dad went to bed, I opened a new phone document and wrote all I remembered. I inserted Dad's reported death at the top and designated it as age 7. Then I listed everything that followed. We changed state within months of the funeral. How Mom grew frightened when military families appeared on TV. When I asked about Dad's service or requested to see his photographs, Mom usually shifted the subject quickly. How she tossed out most of his items during the relocation because it hurt too much. How we never visited his grave, she said. Writing down my therapy sessions where I sobbed over losing him. I had years of nightmares. Mom exploited my sadness to dominate me and make me feel guilty for being sad. Writing it out revealed patterns. It was several lies. This 10-year lie building was painstakingly developed, all meant to prevent me from asking the appropriate questions. The phone lighted up at midnight. Text from Mom. It suggested we chat if I stopped spreading stories and bad-mouthing her to neighbors. People asking inquiries embarrassed her. She said I was being emotional and we could resolve this if I calmed down and came home. Rate it 3 times. I froze as my thumb approached the respond button. I studied the message for 25 minutes. Part of me wanted to type back everything I felt, but I knew she wanted that. She wanted me to talk so she could distort my words and drive me mad. Instead, I screenshotted the text. I uploaded my evidence folder to the collection. Then I put my phone face down on the desk without replying. Dad ate the free motel meal I took back to the room the next morning. I suggested discussing limits and safety. He glanced up at me like he was expecting terrible news. I said Mom and David might call him and he couldn't tell them where we were staying or what we were doing. He nodded but didn't speak. I persisted. I suggested they could attempt to convince him I lied or left him. I insisted he couldn't let them know no matter what. He consented, but his eyes showed worry. The dread Palmer showed when he believed I may abandon him. I grabbed his arm across the little table. I assured him I wouldn't leave. I meant my promise to solve this together. He resumed eating once his shoulders loosened. I had an afternoon legal aid appointment. The office was in a strip mall beside a tax preparer. It smelled like old coffee and copy machine toner inside. Sophia Williams was waiting in a tiny office after the receptionist had me fill out an intake form. Her black hair pushed back and spectacles made her look younger, maybe 30. She shook our hands and invited us to seat. She opened a yellow legal pad and suggested to begin. I told her everything. Waking up to cold water on my birthday, the shelter counselor discovering Dad, the porch confrontation, and the depleted bank accounts. Never interrupting, she made crisp notes and nodded sometimes. After I finished, she glanced up. "We may sue for fraud and conversion," she replied. She said that was legal slang for lying to steal money and property. If the district attorney got involved, she claimed there was a criminal element. She asked for evidence, so I gave her my phone with images and recordings. She thought I was wise to save everything. She stated it would take time but she would help us. My phone called from an unknown number 3 days later. He introduced himself as Lucas Gray from Adult Protective Services. He wanted to schedule a phone intake after the shelter counselor introduced me. I took my notebook. I addressed his queries concerning Dad's predicament fully. He indicated filing a case file and assigning an investigator. He said it would take time since they wanted to interview many people and acquire financial documents. I grew impatient. I wanted answers now. I wanted Mom and David punished instantly. Lucas's voice was steady. He believed comprehensive inquiry was preferable than fast dismissal. I knew he was right despite my frustration. He stated someone will call to schedule interviews in a week and to keep documenting. The bank called next. Fraud Department employee Isabel Stone. She started a case file after receiving my initial report. She then listed necessary paperwork. Police record, identification, proof the account was for my benefit. Any statements confirming my parents' access were unauthorized. Though I wrote everything down, each requirement seemed like a mountain to conquer. Some of these were missing. I had no idea how to attract others. Isabel may have detected my anxiousness and advised me to take it slow. "Get what I can and call her," she replied. She gave me her direct phone and stated she was my case agent. VA Victor Hall called that afternoon. He requested a housing and caregiver program consultation as a social worker. He also suggested changing Dad's representative salary. He mentioned HUDIV, caregiver stipends, help and attendance and other unfamiliar initiatives. I took out my notepad again and wrote swiftly, but he was talking fast and I was forgetting stuff. He must have realized since he slowed down and promised to send me everything. He inquired when we might meet in person. I relaxed when I saw Dad watching TV on the bed. Someone who knew the system and wanted to help us may have brought relief or optimism. The meeting was the next week, and when I hung up, my hands stopped shaking. Elena Carter at the legal aid office helped me write a formal request to Peaceful Rest Funeral Home the next morning. I told her the memorial service address Mom took me 12 years ago. Elena said we required official proof of their services contra Mom's claims. She typed and I signed the legal aid letterhead request. An envelope came at the hotel 3 days later. Dad watched from the bed as I opened it. The funeral home director stated that they offered memorial ceremony space on the day but got no remains for burial or cremation. Their documents indicated a 2-hour chapel rental, no casket purchase, burial site, or cremation permission. I felt sick after reading it twice. I knew Dad was living, but reading that the funeral was empty made me ill. I drove to downtown police to report that afternoon. The front desk officer escorted me to Detective Hugo Larkin's office. He was about 50 with gray hair and pushed-up reading spectacles. I sat in a plastic chair across from his desk while he opened a form on his computer. I told him about waking up to cold water on my 20th birthday, discovering Dad alive at Palmer, my depleted bank accounts, and 10 years of stolen benefits because he begged me to start again. Hugo typed continuously. After I completed, he printed and had me check the report. He said it would take time to investigate. Multiple parties and government benefits made financial crimes complicated, but the report number helped me with the bank and other authorities. He gave me a business card and urged me to call if I recalled anything, or if my parents called. I folded and placed the report in my evidence folder. 3 days later, I looked out the window while sorting files on the hotel bed. David's vehicle was 3 places down, just looking at our room from behind the wheel. Whole body cooled. I phoned 911 immediately on my phone. I stuffed our belongings in bags. I could hardly zip because my hands trembled. Dad wondered what was wrong. I pointed out the window. His face blanched. My dispatcher stayed on the line as I packed. Police were 7 minutes away, she stated. David remained in view through the curtain. He remained still, watching us. After police came, David drove carefully. The cops collected a report and urged me to record future interaction. I sat on the floor with my back to the bed after they departed. Dad grabbed my shoulder. From now on, we pack our suitcases in case. Elena Carter helped me get my district office school records the next day. She said we required proof of Mom's years-long grieving treatment. A week later, I spread the documents on the hotel desk. Pages of counseling notes from 7 to 16. Each had the parent loss diagnosis code. My therapist's notes showed my persistent trauma over Dad's purported death. I sobbed over missing him. How I had funeral dreams. How Mom informed the therapist I needed help processing my father's wartime death. The identical diagnostic code was used to bill my parents' insurance for each session. Reading years of my sadness and clinical terminology made me feel like I was reading about someone else's anguish. But it also left a paper trail showing how long and purposefully Mom and David lied. Elena issued formal preservation letters the week after. The bank and my parents' address were visited. The letters required them not to erase Dad's benefits or my account data in legal language. Elena said this was normal before suing. Destroying evidence after receiving this notice might result in extra sanctions. She believed formal legal language was strong. We informed them that we were constructing a case and wanted to preserve everything. I felt different after reading the letter before she mailed it. I reacted to their actions for weeks. We now demanded their cooperation. Isabel Stone contacted 3 days later to update. She stated the bank's fraud investigation found a pattern. Years-old transfers from Dad's benefits account to Mom and David's joint account. She marked the transactions as suspicious and built a chronology, but she advised me that further data was needed to prove the payments were unlawful. We wanted VA paperwork demonstrating Dad never approved Mom as his agent. We may require court orders to access accounts. She stated the bank was investigating, but it might take time. I recorded everything she said in my notes. Each evidence piece seemed like another brick in our wall. The VA phoned Dad the same week to interview him. Victor Hall said they were evaluating Dad's representative salary. To guarantee he could convey his preferences, they interviewed him alone without relatives. The VA clinic appointment was the following Tuesday. Victor stated that this was usual process for pay authority issues. They wanted to know what Dad wanted and who he trusted with his perks. Hope returned after weeks. Someone finally prioritized Dad's wishes over others. I helped Dad rehearse answering interview questions effectively, despite his nerves. Lucas Gray phoned 3 days later. He stated he visited Mom and David's residence for the APS investigation. They cooperated and claimed power of attorney to oversee Dad's hospital affairs. Lucas said they looked prepared with documentation and explanations, but he wanted copies to establish validity. He explained that financial exploiters typically have legitimate-looking papers. He investigated to verify their authority. He stated he'd inform me as the inquiry progressed. After hanging up, I was frustrated. Naturally, Mom and David cooperated. For 10 years they lied well. Elena acquired copies of the claimed power of attorney the next week through discovery. She called me to her office and spread the document on her desk. Dad apparently gave Mom power over the signature line. Even my inexperienced eye saw something strange. Weak, uneven letters. Dad's signature on his VA records and our applications were unique. The date was 13 years ago, when Dad was hospitalized. Elena Carter found further document issues. A fading notary seal. Witness signatures were scarcely discernible. She indicated we might need a handwriting expert to show it was fabricated, but the paper seemed suspicious even without that. Dad and I got him a state ID at the DMV the next morning. Since the hotel was temporary, Victor Hall helped us set up a VAPO box for official correspondence. We completed the application, and Dad provided his discharge papers and Social Security card for verification. The clerk processed everything and stated the ID will be ready in 20 minutes. We waited in plastic seats. Dad came up to the desk when they called his name, and the clerk gave him a temporary paper ID with his photo. Dad studied it intently. Name, first address in 10 years, not hospital or Mom and David's residence. Our address. I observed him carefully fold and put it in his wallet. Just a piece of paper containing his details, but it seemed like a little win in a fight we were still losing. While returning at the hotel, Victor Hall called that afternoon. He asked if I had time to review the VA Caregiver Program application, and I agreed instantly. He explained what medical data I needed from Dad's Palmer file, and which papers needed a doctor's signature over the phone. The application required details regarding Dad's daily care, disability, and treatment plan. I checked boxes for medicine, appointment, food prep, and emotional assistance. Every inquiry heightened the weight of my burden. With Victor's connections, I started the first training session that night, watching films regarding veteran mental health and caregiver burnout. The program stressed setting boundaries and asking for help, which seemed unusual when I was 20 and clueless. Victor acknowledged he got my entire VA portal application and that the approval process might take several weeks, but he'd follow up to keep things going. I made my first appointment with Amelia Fletcher at the community mental health clinic 3 days after the shelter counselor referred me. Mismatched furnishings and motivating posters decorated the clinic's converted home waiting area. I followed Amelia to a little lavender-scented office when she phoned. She was maybe 40, had spectacles, and moved calmly, making the area feel safer. I spoke about my parents pushing me out and finding Dad and the stolen money when she inquired what brought me here. I noticed my hands were trembling and I was talking too quickly halfway through. She listened and took notes without interrupting or fixing anything. She asked me how I was sleeping and eating when I finished, and I said poorly. She promised to work on coping skills and trauma processing, but for now she wanted me to know I had a place to talk. The session lasted 50 minutes, yet leaving felt like letting go of something heavy. I saw Isabel Stone from the bank in the branch the following week for a comprehensive interview. She printed and underlined every transaction on my old savings account from 5 years ago with sticky notes. Isabel asked who started each withdrawal and transfer, what it was for, and if I consented. I stated Mom always maintained the money was saved for college. I never had access to the account, and I didn't realize she could cancel at any time. Isabel questioned about my joint account, and I told her Mom claimed it was customary for parents to be on their kids' accounts when I was 13. She noted everything and discussed the bank's temporary credit fraud guidelines. Although the account was shared, the pattern of access and time of the final withdrawal, when I realized Dad was alive, made a compelling case. She promised to report back to me in 2 weeks once the fraud review committee reviewed everything. Lucas Gray contacted days later to arrange a DNA test. He emphasized that we required biological proof to disprove Mom and David's claims regarding my status in Dad's case. The APS file would contain the test results from an approved lab. I consented even though it seemed improper, like I had to prove my family. The next morning, a technician swabbed my cheek and Dad's and labeled the samples with case numbers at the lab. Everything took 10 minutes. I was furious that 10 years of deceit required me to scientifically prove I was my father's son as I left. Dad was silent in the car, and I know he felt it. This intrusive confirmation of a simple truth. In the legal assistance office, Elena Carter updated me. She filed an emergency application for interim control of particular accounts, alleging that Mom and David's access risked additional asset loss. The application asked the court to freeze accounts and demand financial reporting during investigations. It was 3 weeks until our hearing. Elena laid down the files on her desk and explained. She explained court was unpredictable and unpleasant, judges had a lot of discretion, and we might not obtain what we wanted, but this was our best chance to stop them from concealing or spending more money while APS and the police worked. She filed the verification forms online once I signed them. That afternoon, the funeral home provided more documents. 3 days later, I opened the hotel envelope and saw invoices and contracts for a memorial service. Nothing else. No cremation, burial, or handling of remains. Just a room rental, seats, and a visitor book. I gazed at the papers attempting to realize that I recalled the funeral and coffin I grieved over. The entire event was theatrical. In a VA hospital 20 meters away, Mom and David had a memorial ceremony for a guy living. Something broke inside me. My hands shook from this chilly hatred. After leaving the motel, I circled the parking lot and neighboring streets for nearly an hour until my legs ached and my fury subsided. Victor Hall requested Dad's HUDVASH screening. Based on his service and situation, Dad qualified for housing vouchers and case management for homeless veterans. The VA clinic screening interview was the following Tuesday. When Victor outlined the procedure, Dad worried they'd believe he was too damaged or didn't need treatment. I sat with him that night to rehearse answering Victor's predicted questions. I told him that he'd served his nation, earned this support, and that being honest about his needs wasn't weakness. We practiced until he could talk about mental health and housing without trembling. The legal assistance office received Mom's personal email. Elena sent it to me with a call request. I read everything, this long, meandering message about sadness, bewilderment, and how she'd always tell me the truth when I was older. She blamed her fear of losing Dad. She said fear drove her awful decisions. Said she never intended to harm. The email was pages long without acknowledging or apologizing for her behavior. Elena contacted me that afternoon and claimed it was a textbook non-apology, admitting nothing and avoiding culpability. She had formally said that all future communication must happen through attorneys. It was comforting to know that someone was interfering so Mom couldn't influence me. Elena suggested employing a handwriting specialist to assess attorney signature strength. She said specialists cost several $1,000s and we should wait to see if the bank's internal assessment identified the paper. If the bank's experts identified signature issues, we'd have free ammo. I wanted answers right away, but I was learning that legal strategy often required patience, waiting for the other side to make mistakes rather than pressing every issue. Elena said she'd keep pressing on numerous fronts and we'd choose the expert after the bank assessment. Dad and I created a regular regimen to avoid spinning. I put his meds in a pill organizer and we took them with breakfast every morning. We then spent an hour on paperwork, phone calls, agency follow-up, document organization, and email. After that, we walked around the hotel parking lot for 10 to 15 minutes. Structure made us feel less out of control. Dad's anxiety diminished when he had a strategy for each day, rather than merely responding to crises. I wanted to solve problems faster certain days, since the routine seemed tiresome. But I was discovering that stability came from modest, steady things, not big discoveries. Giovanni called Thursday morning when I was organizing Dad's meds in the weekly organizer. A PS early examination confirmed our worries about financial exploitation and warranted more investigation, but it also confirmed everything we'd been stating. He told me it wasn't a final decision, but it provided Detective Hugo Larkin good platform to work from in the criminal case. That formal abuse record would bolster our criminal investigation and civil actions. After weeks of feeling like I was overreacting, someone official said it occurred, so I thanked him and hung up, then stared at the pill organizer. That Mom and David committed genuine maltreatment using paper evidence. Isabel Stone from the bank phoned 2 hours later to explain how their analysis detected the power of attorney signature as possibly faked based on Dad's other paperwork. She claimed they were halting Dad's welfare withdrawals while they investigated. Although we didn't get our money back, this stopped Mom and David from draining more while we developed the case. She estimated another couple weeks for the evaluation. That things proceeded slowly, but holds were instant and enforced. Dad inquired what was going on, and I detailed both calls, seeing his expression change from perplexity to optimism, that maybe the system worked occasionally, instead of crushing the weak. Elena Carter met us 30 minutes early in the foyer of the county courthouse to discuss the restraining order hearing on Monday. She stated that the court will hear both parties, study the police record concerning David entering our parking lot, and determine whether to grant or deny the order. Dad's leg bounced as we passed through security and sat on a bench outside the courthouse. David arrived with a cheap-suited lawyer. My stomach fell because I half thought he wouldn't bother and would allow the order through. However, he appeared self-righteous and aggressive. The bailiff called our case, and we entered court. We and Elena versus David and his lawyer. The judge invited David's lawyer to appear first. He said David never threatened us, was simply checking on family after a traumatic circumstance, and we were crazy. Elena stood up and explained the police complaint, harassing pattern, and David's appearance shortly after we initiated legal procedures to the court. The judge studied the report for what seemed like forever. I then questioned David whether he had a valid reason to be in our parking lot at night. David began discussing family duties, and the judge interrupted. Provided a restricted order directing David to keep 500 feet away from us for 6 months based on evidence of intimidation. We left and I felt relieved and disappointed since 6 months felt like protection and insufficient. Elena said it was a good win, and offenses will result in jail time. We headed to Palmer for Dad's VA representative salary interview on Wednesday. A stranger social worker escorted Dad into an office alone, and I waited 40 minutes, checking my phone every 2 minutes. Dad emerged exhausted but all right. They asked who would manage his benefits, and he immediately chose me. The social worker phoned me thereafter and told I had to finish training modules and submit documentation. However, Dad's evident preference influenced their decision. She gave me a training booklet and said they'd contact me about future steps. Everything was to be finished in a month. We departed after thanking her. Dad was silent in the passenger seat and stated he was afraid I'd think it was too much responsibility and leave. He nodded when I assured him I wasn't leaving and we were doing this together, but I could tell he wasn't convinced. Victor Hall phoned Thursday afternoon to say, Dad passed the HUDVASH eligibility screening and we were approved to start looking for a unit. He introduced me to R.Studio Carney, the housing coordinator, who stated we required a one-bedroom that matched program guidelines and the voucher would cover most of the rent. R.Studio promised to bring me qualifying listings and schedule viewings once I discovered properties I liked. I hung up and informed Dad we got actual housing, not hotel coupons. He requested a price. I explained that the coupon covered most of it and we'd just pay a little fraction, giving us our first real stability since things started. He quieted again, and I saw he was sobbing, sitting there with tears in his eyes. I didn't know what to say. I sat with him till he calmed down. I updated Dad's postal address with every agency on my laptop all afternoon Friday. Each agency, Social Security, VA, bank, pharmacy, insurance, has its own form and verification process. Victor Hall advised me to use a VA PO box as our permanent address until we found stable housing to avoid postal difficulties. I felt like I was taking away Mom and David's power with each document I submitted, affecting their access to Dad's information and perks. Typing cramped my fingers and screen watching burnt my eyes. I continued because tiresome administrative labor protected someone. Not via confrontations, but through paperwork. Monday morning, Isabel Stone from the bank called to say they were giving me a tiny temporary credit to a new student account they helped me create, unrelated to my parents. She told me it was only a portion of what was stolen and may be overturned if their investigation didn't corroborate my accusations, so I shouldn't spend it on anything except essentials. The deposit arrived Tuesday, and I glanced at the sum for a minute. This modest quantity of money was mine and couldn't be taken without notice. Some of it went for groceries instead of the lodging voucher. Dad helped me make dinner in the little kitchenette. Wednesday, someone purporting to be my mom's cousin posted on social media that the family needed to meet to resolve issue before it got worse. I read it 3 times and spotted the manipulation aspect in the statement before it became more convoluted. I took legal action instead of them stealing from us for 10 years. Elena Carter responded to my screenshot by claiming we weren't meeting with anyone without attorneys. Even though it saddened me that family had to function this way, and that I couldn't trust Mom's side to care about us, sending that message felt powerful. Elena phoned Thursday to offer a settlement meeting before launching a complete case, saying that litigation was expensive and long and that an agreement on restitution and responsibility could be preferable than years in court. I thought Mom and David would always make excuses and downplay their actions. She acknowledged it was likely, but advised trying settlement first because we could sue if they refused to bargain. I instructed her to put it up but didn't anticipate much. I opened the simple envelope with the DNA results on Friday, knowing what they would say. The test revealed I was Dad's biological son with 99.9% confidence, disproving any allegation that I wasn't entitled to his care or rights. Giovanni Gray called an hour later to say he'd gotten the findings and was filing them with APS for the official record. Another proof of our connection and my legal status. I placed the report to our evidence folder and cloud backup. This proof of something I never doubted but the system forced me to validate. 3 days after the DNA results arrived, Victor Hall called as I made breakfast in the hotel kitchenette. His VA review of Dad's representation pay modification was pending final approval within 3 weeks. Mom and David couldn't touch anything while the paperwork proceeded because they placed interim holds on the account to prevent unwanted access. Victor said I'd have legal power to administer Dad's benefits, complete control over the money that was intended to support us all these years. Dad listened to my chat at the small table. Just after I hung up and told him what Victor said, his hands started trembling. I held them till he nodded and breathed. Legal assistants held the settlement session the next Tuesday in a tiny conference room with a scuffed table and flickering overhead lights. Elena sat next to me with her laptop open and 3 folders of paperwork. Mom arrived first with her attorney, a middle-aged man in a wrinkled suit who probably wanted to go. Mom's eyes were red and swollen from sobbing in the vehicle, and she rushed out to hug me when she saw me. I watched her till she sat down. David arrived 10 minutes late without a lawyer, sat down, and claimed that this was a misunderstanding and that we were making him seem terrible at work. Elena ignored him and opened the first folder with bank statements showing Dad's rewards sent to their joint account. Mom's lawyer shifted and took notes. Elena calmly and meticulously read each document, pointing out dates, quantities, and the sequence of Dad's hospitalization and transfers. Mom frequently interrupted with explanations about how bewildered she was after losing her spouse and how she felt she was doing the right thing. David shouted that they had power of attorney and everything was lawful. Elena simply asked him to explain why the signature didn't match Dad's other signatures on file by pulling out the query paper. Except for the fluorescent lights, the room was quiet. Something changed in my chest as I saw Mom grieve and David cycle between fury and defensiveness. I wasn't furious anymore, just drained and ready to go on with Dad. After 2 hours, Mom's attorney proposed reparation and Elena responded with precise terms. We agreed that Mom and David would pay back the stolen monies over time based on the investigations. It wasn't all we were entitled and there was no criminal acknowledgement, but Elena said it gave us a legal foundation and we could pursue additional possibilities if they didn't cooperate. I signed where she said and left without looking at Mom, who was weeping harder when she realized I wouldn't forgive her. We had the asset freeze hearing 2 days later. An elderly lady judge reviewed Elena Carter's request as we waited and asked Mom's counsel whether he opposed a limited freeze on the disputed accounts. He claimed hardship, but the judge cut him off and concluded the evidence demonstrated wealth dissipation danger. Her freeze prevented Mom and David from transferring or concealing money during the investigations. A partial triumph, but protection. I learned that legal progress was made in little procedural stages, not TV-style courtroom dramas. Dad inquired if we won as we left the courts, and I said we received what we needed. R.Studio contacted that afternoon to report finding a one-bedroom HUDVASH apartment near bus lines and the VA facility. With a screening the next morning, I scarcely slept, worried something might go wrong. The flat was on the second level of a simple brick structure with a little parking lot. R.Studio greeted us outdoors and showed us the functional appliances and leasing details. White, clean walls. The bedroom window let in sunshine and the bathroom had genuine water pressure. Standing in the empty living room, my chest relaxed after being tight since my 20th birthday. This worry and uncertainty nod is easing. Dad double-checked each room's walls, unable to believe them. R.Studio said we could move in 2 weeks when the final paperwork was processed, so I signed the application on his clipboard. That night, the caregiver program delivered an acceptance email awaiting training module completion. The web link opened and I began learning about medication management, mobility aid and distress signals. After 3 days of training, I'd get a monthly stipend for helping Dad with everyday tasks and medical appointments. Though little, it was steady income. More importantly, it confirmed that caring for Dad was work, not just something I should do for free since he was family. Giovanni Gray phoned the next week to say APS sent Mom and David a preliminary letter of concern. They were informed by letter that the inquiry discovered financial abuse of a handicapped veteran. He stressed that this wasn't a final decision but would strengthen the criminal prosecution and civil recovery. I inquired what happened next, and Giovanni said the DA's office would study the whole report and determine whether to press charges based on the evidence. Move-in day was Saturday morning. Dad and I rode the bus to the new apartment with our few hotel items and garbage bags. R.Studio showed up with the keys and helped bring items upstairs. He left us alone, so Dad paced between the living room and bedroom. He continued asking, what if the VA changed their mind? What if we couldn't afford it? What if Mom and David found us and caused trouble? His breathing became shallow, and I suspected a panic attack. I took him to the couch and sat next to him to teach him Amelia Fletcher's therapeutic breathing techniques. 4 counts in, 4 holds, 4 out. We did that until his shoulders and hands stopped trembling. We painstakingly unloaded, putting Dad's few clothing in the closet and arranging our donated dishes in the kitchen cupboards to make the empty apartment feel like ours. The bank inquiry update came from Agatha Stone Monday afternoon. She indicated internal fraud fines warranted a greater temporary credit to my protected account. It would cover a large percentage of my college savings lost. She cautioned me that it was still provisional pending final findings, but having money in my own account was like breathing after being underwater. To verify, I checked the balance 3 times that day. Father began dating Victor Montes the next week. Victor, a trauma-specialized VA psychiatrist, worked in the same building as Dad's other doctors. I read old magazines and watched the clock in the lobby during the first appointment. Dad emerged an hour later, exhausted but calmer. In the car, he said Victor was honest about the job ahead, admitting military trauma and psychological damage from 10 years of false hospitalization. Victor's optimism about Dad's recuperation gave us hope for the first time in a long time. The next week, I boarded the bus to the community college and located Cassie Vickers' office on the Student Services Building's 2nd floor. She was younger than expected, maybe late 20s, with a form-covered desk and a Deadline Survivor coffee mug. I told them I was 20, caring for my injured veteran father, and needed to sort out college. Cassie opened the fee waiver program on her computer and clicked prerequisites. I informed her I could get copies of my high school transcripts which were still at my previous address. She took a note and opened a course catalog to show me a typical first semester for a part-time worker and caregiver. She advised starting 2 online programs with flexible deadlines and described how the Disability Services Office may help if Dad had a crisis and I needed extensions. She didn't judge me for beginning late or being unable to carry a full load, so my shoulders relaxed. She was helping me develop something functional. She filed my fee waiver application immediately away, after we completed the enrollment documents, indicating it generally takes 2 weeks. I left her office with a spring semester course schedule and a campus map with the financial assistance office underlined in red. Elena Carter called 3 days later while I helped Dad gather his weekly pills. She stated Mom's attorney suggested Mom and David sell one of their automobiles to pay initial reparation. It would cost roughly $8,000. Following the settlement agreement in good faith. I tightened my jaw because their gestures felt manipulative. Elena was already discussing the terms. She stated she had arranged that the amount go immediately into the restitution escrow account and that they submit the bill of sale and deposit proof within 30 days. Elena's voice grew hesitant when I inquired whether they were accepting responsibility. She explained they were following the arrangement to avoid legal action, which wasn't regret but compliance. She promised to send me copies of everything when I validated the payment in writing. After we hung up, Dad nodded slowly while holding the pill bottles as I described it. He didn't care why as long as they returned the money. 2 weeks later, I noticed David's truck in the parking lot while taking groceries to the apartment. I stopped walking with bags in my hands because my stomach fell. He stared at the windows from the driver's seat 50 feet from our building with the motor off. I instantly turned around and returned to the street with my phone. I contacted 911 to report a restraining order violation, provided David's address and license plate. I was instructed to stay on the line and relocate to safety by the dispatcher. I watched the parking lot entrance from the bus stop around the corner. I noticed a police cruiser approach David's truck within 10 minutes. David gestured and pointed, but the police didn't like it. The officer led David to the police car after a brief conversation. A second officer came, and I told him David had no cause to be at our residence and showed him the restraining order documentation on my phone. The officer stated David was arrested for violation and I'd receive a court date. The next week, I saw David try to convince the judge he was only driving through the area. The prosecutor showed the police report, GPS data from the 911 call confirming I was at the apartment complex, and officer images of David's truck parked in our lot. The court looked at David and stated this was a blatant breach of a protection order, asking whether he knew that it was meant to prevent this type of interaction. David tried to argue, but his attorney grabbed his arm. The court extended the restraining order to a year and warned that any subsequent violations would result in arrest and jail time until trial. For the first time since everything began, I felt like the judicial system was prioritizing our safety over paperwork. Elena Carter replied with a thumbs up emoji, and good. The VA letter arrived on Thursday afternoon in a hefty package with official seals. Before understanding it, I read the first paragraph 3 times at the kitchen table. After the representative payee change, I could legally administer Dad's benefits. The letter provided transition instructions, benefits coordinator contact information, and a checklist. I sat clutching the pages, feeling the weight of this. Now I was responsible for Dad's finances. Not Mom's, David's, or some VA stranger who never checked on him. I paid his expenses, supplied his meds, and fulfilled his basic necessities. Though overwhelming, it was appropriate. After 10 years of exploitation, I was happy that someone trusted me to do what was right. I showed Dad the letter in the living room while he watched the news. He read it slowly and looked up at me with wet eyes, saying, "Thank you." My first caregiver stipend check arrived on the 15th. I checked my phone during Dad's doctor visit and saw the deposit message. I read the amount and VA caregiver support program description for a minute. The few $100s were steady monthly income. Together with Dad's benefits, which I now managed, we could afford rent, food, and stability without perpetual crises. Dad touched my shoulder when we returned to the car after I showed him the notification. Instead of ramen and canned soup, I got fresh veggies at the grocery store on the way home. It seemed luxurious even though it was ordinary food bought by ordinary folks. Isabel Stone contacted the next week to confirm the automobile sale's initial payment to the reparation escrow. She explained the deposit and confirmed Mom's attorney's guarantee. She gently reminded me that my bank's temporary credits were still pending their fraud investigation. However, money pouring back seemed like progress. It wasn't justice or all we lost, but it was something I could point to and say they're paying penalties. Isabel told me the bank investigation was still underway, but this reparation payment proved Mom and David acknowledged the problem, which bolstered our case. She promised to update me, and I thanked her for everything. Dad and I decided on limits that night. We vowed not to contact Mom or David without our attorneys and would stick to it this time. Mom, David, and any other family numbers I recognized were banned. In the following weeks, Mom called from several numbers and I didn't answer. David's sister asked to speak on social media, so I blocked her. I erased David's brother's message suggesting I was pulling the family apart without responding. I felt stronger every time I kept that barrier instead of giving in to shame or curiosity. Non-engagement gave me a tranquility I didn't know was possible. I could finally breathe without waiting for the next manipulation or disaster. 3 months after waking up to cold water on my face, I was seated at our kitchen table with Dad's evening pills. The apartment smelled like the cheap chicken and rice I baked, and my laptop was open to my community college curriculum for the online writing class I started the week before. Dad laughed at the host's comment while watching a cookery show in the living room. I surveyed our limited space, the thrift shop sofa, donated dishes in the cupboard, and the magnetized VA appointment reminder on the fridge. This peaceful Thursday night with meds, supper, and homework. This showed steadiness. Not thrilling or dramatic, just reliable and safe. Nothing is ideal right now, so I won't lie. After 10 years apart, we're still in treatment, going through legal processes, and learning how to be father and son. Dad still has nightmares and panic episodes, and I still am upset over our stolen childhood. The lease on our home is ours. We have food in the fridge bought with non-stealable money. We established our own future strategy. That's no happy ending with everything neatly organized and everyone living happily ever after. A better thing. A good start. That was a tour of the worst parenting mistakes. You may believe your family is convoluted, but they probably didn't fake anyone's death. Probably. At 14, my parents made me sign a $600 rent contract or leave home. A week later, a lawyer's letter landed on their table, and their faces went pale. My mother told me one day when signing a permission card that now that I'm 12, I can buy my own school lunch. We're not made of money, and you should understand the importance of hard work. That's when Mother stopped purchasing me basic school materials. When I requested for fresh notebooks and pencils, she replied, "Figure it out. Other kids your age have jobs, so you should consider getting one too." I felt perplexed and embarrassed asking instructors for more materials as my father watched his costly sports package, which cost more per month than the whole school supply list. They had recently purchased a new 60-inch television but were unable to buy a $10 box of pencils. I started babysitting on weekends and walking dogs after school to cover the cost of basic essentials like clothing and food. The embarrassment of wearing too short pants and hole-filled shoes seared in my chest, but I attempted to seem normal. "Look at our little entrepreneur," Dad would say when I arrived home fatigued from work. "Maybe you'll realize why we can't just offer you whatever you want." I'd grin and nod while calculating how to make $25 last for a week of meals. By 13, they had stopped buying me meals and were ordering takeout twice a week for themselves. I'd arrive home hungry to find them devouring restaurant food and empty cabinets. Mom would tell you that you could get a job at the grocery store and purchase your own food like an adult while eating her Chinese takeout. The fragrance of their food made my stomach hurt. But I learned to stay in my room until they were finished, so I didn't have to watch them eat stuff I couldn't afford. I became better at money management than my parents ever were because I had to make every dollar count. While they impulsively purchased electronics and restaurant meals, I investigated each purchase and sought the greatest value. I developed a little business doing yard work and pet sitting that made great money. The irony was that as a teenager, I demonstrated more financial discipline than they did as adults. They still criticized me for being poor since I wore thrift shop clothing. Mom remarked it's humiliating to have a daughter who dresses like she's homeless when I wore a second-hand outfit to a family gathering. "People are going to think we don't take care of you." I wanted to shout since they didn't take care of me and hadn't purchased me clothing in 2 years. Dad would moan to his buddies about how costly children were, while I sat there knowing I had been financially independent since middle school. I extended my business and began generating real money by providing lawn care and pet services to most of the neighborhood. My parents acted as if my achievement was due to their tough love style. Dad would warn people, "Watch what happens when you stop enabling kids and make them work for what they want. She understands the worth of a dollar, unlike these spoilt brats whose parents give them everything," he added while drinking $40 bottles of wine and playing golf at the country club. But then Dad lost his job and their attitude toward money shifted dramatically. "We're having financial difficulties," Mom stated, and she asked if I might lend them money for groceries. "Just until your father discovers something new." I watched them panic about missing their mortgage payment while I had spent years budgeting down to the last penny. They had no savings despite earning a respectable living because they had spent every dollar on wants rather than requirements. Dad replied, You've got all that money sitting in your account. When I refused to give them cash. During difficult times, family members support one another. I reminded him that when I was 12, I was supposed to help my family and eat peanut butter for dinner every night. That was different because we were teaching you responsibility, Mom remarked, as if that made sense. This is an actual emergency. They continued asking for money every few days and becoming angry when I declined. Dad stated, "You're being selfish and ungrateful after everything we've done for you," during one of his pleading bouts. "We could have booted you out years ago, but we allowed you to stay here for free." I explained that allowing your minor child to live in your home was the legal minimal obligation for parents. "Don't be clever with us when we ask for aid," Mom yelled back. I was calculating my funds and preparing to leave for college when both of my parents approached me in the kitchen with serious looks. "We've been discussing, and we believe it's time for you to begin contributing to household expenditures," Mom added, with Dad nodding behind her. "You're 14 now, and you earn a nice living, so it's only right that you pay rent." Dad approached with a contract in his hands. "You may either pay $600 per month with utilities, or find another place to live." I glanced at the document Dad was holding, and my thoughts went utterly blank for a moment. The paper had official-looking headers and signature lines. $600 a month plus utilities meant that I'd be spending nearly all of my earnings, leaving nothing for food or emergencies. I quickly calculated the numbers in my thoughts. In a good month, I earned around $700 from my lawn care company and pet sitting. This house's utilities bill increased by at least $200 during the summer when they turned on the air conditioning. That would leave me with around $100 for everything else, including food, clothing, school materials, and mower gas. My parents were watching me as if they expected me to just sign. Mom crossed her arms and Dad held out a pen. I said I needed time to think about it and went to my room before they could protest. Dad called after me for being theatrical, but I closed and shut my door. My hands trembled as I brought out my budget notebook and ran the figures, which confirmed what I already knew. This would demolish all I've created. For the past 2 years I've been quite frugal. I've saved over $1,500 for emergencies and college application expenses. If I paid them rent, my funds would be depleted in 3 months, leaving me with nothing to cover the essentials they stopped supplying. I write out several situations, but they all finish in the same manner. There is no version of this that works without leaving me hungry or losing my business equipment. My eyes are moist, but I'm not sobbing, so the notebook pages are a little blurry. I'm simply upset and afraid, trying to figure out what to do. That night I lie awake on my phone, investigating whether parents may legally charge rent for their underage children. The answers are difficult and vary by state, but most authorities agree that parents have a responsibility to give basic assistance until their children reach the age of 17. Some forums have individuals claiming that when they were adolescents, their parents charged them rent, which was okay. Others believe it is neglect if the parents do not provide food and basics. According to a legal assistance website, parents are responsible for providing their children with shelter, food, clothes, medical treatment, and education. Charging rent may be okay if they are still supplying all of the other necessities, however my parents have not purchased me food in over a year. They have not purchased me clothing since I was 12. I screenshot everything that appears relevant and store it to a folder on my phone. Around 1 a.m., I eventually fell asleep with my phone still in hand. When my alarm goes off, I'm fatigued, and my eyes ache from seeing small print for hours. The next morning, I inform my parents that I won't sign anything until I talk to someone at school about it. We're in the kitchen, and they're having breakfast that they purchased for themselves. Dad's face goes crimson, and he begins ranting about disrespect. He claims I am being ungrateful and that they have every right to charge me rent. Mom gets in, claiming I'm acting like a spoilt brat who believes she's too wonderful to serve her family. Despite my racing heart, I remain cool. I tell them that I just want to make sure I understand everything before signing a formal contract. Dad smacks his coffee mug on the counter, spilling coffee everywhere. He approaches me, but I take my backpack and leave for school early. I can hear him shouting behind me as I go down the driveway, but I don't glance back. My hands shake again as I unlock my bike. The trip to school generally takes 10 minutes, but I finish in about 7 since I'm cycling so hard. I'm hardly paying attention in my morning courses, trying to find out who I can trust with this. My math teacher is teaching something about equations, but I am simply looking at my notepad. In English, we're meant to perform group work, but I inform my group that I'm not feeling well and sit alone. Mrs. Carter, the school counselor, has always been friendly when I've met her in the hallways. So, around lunch I go to her office. The main office secretary inquires whether I have an appointment. I tell her it's an emergency, and she glances at me for a moment before picking up the phone. Mrs. Carter emerges a few minutes later and leads me into her office. She's presumably in her late 30s, has gray hair, and is wearing a cardigan despite the fact that it's warm. Her workplace features plants on the windowsill and encouraging pictures on the walls. Mrs. Carter listens to everything without interrupting, and when I'm finished, she appears really concerned. I tell her about being 12 when they stopped purchasing lunch and supplies, about working since middle school to finance food and clothing, about them ordering takeaway while I ate peanut butter, about the closed pantry, and about Dad's contract that I must sign. She writes in a notepad and nods. After I finish talking, she asks whether I feel comfortable at home and if my parents have ever been physically aggressive, which they have not. She inquires whether they've ever hit me or threatened to injure me. I tell her, no, they've never done that. They just stopped taking care of me financially, and now they want me to pay them. Mrs. Carter's countenance becomes serious, and she taps her pen on the desk. She says that, while she is not a lawyer, charging a kid rent raises severe concerns regarding parental responsibilities. According to her, parents are responsible for their children's fundamental needs until they reach the age of 17. If they charge rent yet do not provide food or clothing, this may be termed neglect. She opens a drawer and takes out several leaflets regarding free legal aid services. She asks if I'd be okay with her making some calls to link me with someone who can provide actual legal counsel. I tell her, yes please. I need help figuring this out. Mrs. Carter takes up her phone and walks outside for a minute. Through the window in her door I can see her chatting to someone and taking notes. When she returns, she informs me that she left a message with legal aid, and that they should call back within a day or so. I agree and feel a tremendous weight lift just by giving someone the truth. For the past 2 years I've been handling things on my own and pretending it's normal. Having an adult listen and take me seriously makes me want to cry, but I keep it together. Mrs. Carter also assists me in applying for free lunch directly in her office, something I should have done years ago but was too ashamed. She opens the form on her computer and assists me with filling it out. She thinks there's nothing to be ashamed about, and that many pupils utilize the service. The application inquires about household income and family size. Mrs. Carter assists me in explaining that my parents do not offer food money, despite the fact that they live in the house. She submits it online and states that I should be authorized within a few days. When I leave her office, I feel lighter than I have for months. Someone is aware, and assistance is being provided. I am not fully alone anymore. The next day, I meet with Daniel Lawson from Legal Aid, who explains that young children must be provided with food, housing, and basic requirements by their parents. Mrs. Carter scheduled the meeting and took me to the legal aid office downtown after school. Daniel seems younger than I imagined, possibly in his early 30s, wearing glasses and a tie. His workplace is tiny, with file boxes packed everywhere. He asks me to sit down and brings out a yellow notebook. He asks that I start from the beginning and tell him everything. I read the entire narrative again, and he takes notes throughout. When I reach to the section concerning the rental agreement, he stops writing and looks up. Charging rent may be deemed neglect if it hinders people from performing their commitments, he argues. He emphasizes that parents are legally obligated to support their underage children. They cannot just decide to stop supplying needs and charge rent instead. Daniel asks extensive questions regarding what my parents provide and what I pay for myself. When I mention everything, food, clothes, school supplies and toiletries, his look becomes more serious. He organizes everything into 2 lists. Provided, and not provided. The not provided list is much longer. He inquires about their salary and whether they are truly struggling financially, or simply prefer not to spend money on me. I tell him about the sports package, the golf membership, and the restaurant meals, how they had a lot of money until Dad was laid off a few months back. Daniel nods and continues writing. He inquires whether I have any proof of what I'm telling him. I show him images from my phone of their takeaway orders heaped in the garbage while my cabinets were empty, photos of the closed pantry, and my budget notebook, which shows every dollar I've made and spent over the last 2 years. Daniel examines everything attentively, and his jaw tightens. He shuts the notepad and settles back into his chair. Daniel assures me that this record is strong proof and just what we need if things worsen. He says that he may send my parents a formal letter clarifying their legal responsibilities as parents of a minor kid. The letter will highlight particular state legislation pertaining to food, housing, clothes, and basic essentials. It won't compel them to change their ways, but it could make them understand they can't simply push me out or demand all of my money. Daniel claims the letter will be professional and accurate, not threatening, but it will make it obvious that their acts may be deemed neglect. He asks whether I want him to email it, and I quickly agree. Having something formal from a lawyer gives me a sense of security I have never had before. Daniel prints out some information papers regarding my rights and instructs me to continue capturing everything. He also provides me with his direct phone contact in case things escalate rapidly. The meeting finishes with him promising to mail the letter within a few days. That evening, I was cooking up ramen in the microwave when my folks walked into the kitchen. They had that serious expression on their faces again, which indicates that they are going to corner me. Dad crosses his arms and asks whether I've considered the rent contract. I take a deep breath and explain that I spoke with a lawyer from legal aid. Mom's face turns paler, and Dad's jaw tightens. I explain that I've learnt that parents must provide basic essentials for their children regardless of whether they pay rent. Dad's face goes crimson, and he begins ranting about how I am threatening them and making them appear like awful parents. His voice becomes louder with each phrase, and I can feel my heart racing, but I maintain a cool demeanor. Mom bursts into tears, accusing me of being ungrateful after 14 years of providing for me. She is crying to make me feel bad, but I have seen it too many times to fall for it. Dad approaches and yells, "I'm tearing this family apart over money." I remain cool and explain what Daniel told me. I'm happy to help with household tasks and contribute in acceptable ways, but I won't sign a contract that takes all of my wages. Despite the fact that my hands are shaking, my voice remains firm. I tell them I need the money for food and school supplies because they stopped supplying them years ago. Dad opens his lips to scold again, but I just turn and walk to my room. They are both shrieking about disrespect and ingratitude behind me, but I continue to go. I hear them rush off to their bedroom, slamming the door so fiercely that the entire house shakes. I lock my bedroom door and sit on my bed with my phone, informing Mrs. Carter that the conflict occurred and that I'm okay. She texts back right away, asking if I'm safe, and I say sure, but I'm rattled up. The home is silent for the remainder of the night. The following week passes with my parents rarely speaking to me. Then one afternoon, I'm at school when Daniel's letter arrives via certified mail. I know because when I return home that evening, the entire house seems changed. The air is dense and strained, and my parents sit at the kitchen table, documents strewn out in front of them. They do not glance at me when I walk in. They say nothing. I take a bite from the minimal resources I can find and head directly to my room. In some ways, quiet is worse than screaming. I hear them chatting in low, furious tones during supper, which I typically avoid, but I can't understand what they're saying. This goes on for days, with them treating me as if I'm invisible while simultaneously observing my every move. Mrs. Carter began checking in with me practically every day at lunchtime. She leads me into her office, where we work on creating a realistic timetable that combines school, job, and study time. My grades have been decreasing because I am too weary and anxious to concentrate on my assignments. She writes my instructors, explaining that I am struggling with family concerns, and assists me in obtaining extensions for missed tasks. We figure out which classes require the most attention, and when I can spend my leisure time to catch up. She also links me with the school's homework aid program, which provides free tutoring. Mrs. Carter creates a spreadsheet covering my complete week, including school hours, job shifts, study blocks, and even time for sleep. Seeing everything put out helps me realize how much I've been attempting to do alone. She prints one copy for me and maintains another in case we need to make changes. My neighbor, Mrs. Parker, has noticed that I am taking my lawn equipment to her garage more frequently than normal. One day, as I was storing my mower and trimmer, she came outside and asked whether everything was well at home. I offer her a sketchy response regarding my parents' financial concerns. Mrs. Parker glances at me for a long time, as if she's debating whether to press for additional information. She doesn't push, but her face suggests she understands more than I do. She notes that her garage has plenty of space if I want to store all of my equipment there permanently rather than just sometimes. I thank her and accept the offer, relieved that my pricey instruments are safe from my parents' interference. The next week, Mrs. Parker begins to give me more steady employment. She asks if I can mow her lawn every week rather than every other week, and if I can also help with some garden care. She pays me ahead for the entire month, which allows me to budget better and feel less stressed about money. While I'm working in her yard one Saturday, she offers me lemonade and casually remarks that her guest room is available if I ever need a place to stay. She says it in a light-hearted tone, as if she's simply conversing, yet her eyes are serious. I thank her and say how much I appreciate it. Having that alternative in the back of my mind helps me feel less confined. At home, things worsen in subtle ways. My parents lock the pantry door and begin counting each thing in the refrigerator. They do not legally refuse me food, but they make it plain what I am permitted to touch. Certain shelves in the refrigerator are off limits, and the pantry is closed except when they are present to oversee. It's their technique of managing my diet without breaking any evident restrictions. I go home from work hungry and find the cupboard shut with a note stating that they'll be home at 8. Meanwhile, I can smell their leftover Chinese food in the fridge. But I'm not supposed to touch it. I start capturing everything on my phone, as Daniel instructed. I snap images of the closed pantry with timestamps. I photograph the empty cupboards that I am permitted to enter, revealing that there is virtually nothing there. When my parents order takeaway, I photograph the bags and containers in the garbage. Then I take shots of my own meal, which is generally peanut butter on toast or simple noodles. I took a snapshot of our bank statements, which showed their restaurant charges. Every piece of evidence is saved in a folder on my phone and then backed up to a cloud account that they cannot access. Daniel responded, "Evidence matters if things escalate to court or child services." I never imagined myself creating a case against my own parents, yet here I am, snapping photographs in my own kitchen as if I were gathering evidence for a criminal investigation. Ryan Brooks comes by my register during a slow spell the following shift and leans on the counter. He watches me check my typical lunch items, which are the cheapest in the shop, and then looks at me with an expression of understanding rather than pity. He notes that they have opportunities for extra hours if I'm interested, and the income will assist with whatever I'm going through. I accept quickly since a more consistent income means less worry about paying rent or buying food. He instructs me to come by his office after my shift to complete the paperwork, and I thank him as I pack my crackers and peanut butter. I fill out the documents the same day, and Ryan assists me in updating my work permit to allow for longer hours because I am still 14. The new schedule begins later that week, with 3 weekday evening shifts and entire weekends, resulting in consistent revenue. But it also means less time for schoolwork, and I'm already behind in 2 subjects due to the stress at home. Mrs. Carter spots me falling asleep in study hall and pulls me away to inquire what's going on. I explain about the increased work hours, and she does not lecture me on priorities or advise me to quit my job, as some adults might. Instead, she assists me in creating a study plan that allows me to catch up on tasks throughout every free time and lunch break. She even talks to my instructors about project extensions, so I don't become overwhelmed with late work. 3 days later, I get home after an evening job to find Dad standing in the driveway, arms crossed. Before I even get out of my car, he starts ranting about how he knew I was getting free lunch at school. Someone from church must have spotted my name on a list or something since he knows information I never gave him. He accuses me of making them appear like deadbeats who can't even feed their own child, and that my poverty act is insulting to the entire family. I try to move by him toward the home, but he blocks my way and continues to talk about how others at church are surely chatting about how bad their parents must be. His voice becomes louder with each phrase, and I notice Mrs. Parker's porch light turning on across the street. She walks outdoors and stands on her doorstep, arms folded, observing us. Dad spots her standing there and lowers his voice to an angry whisper, but I can see his jaw straining, and his fingers tighten at his sides. He tells me the conversation isn't finished and goes back inside, slamming the door so forcefully that the windows rattle. The next weekend, I return home after cutting lawns to discover my equipment in the center of the yard, thoroughly saturated from the morning shower. My parents insist they had no idea it was going to rain and wanted to move the car out of the garage for errands. But my mower won't start, and when I inspect the engine, I notice water damage that will cost more to repair than the mower is worth. I sit on the damp ground, gazing at my wrecked equipment, and I feel like crying for the first time in months. This mower represented half of my company, and replacing it will require weeks of saving. Mrs. Parker arrives about an hour later and discovers me still sitting there, trying to figure out what to do. She stares at the wrecked mower and then at my parents' car sitting in the driveway, asking no questions about what occurred. She instructs me to bring all of my equipment to her garage right now, and that I may keep everything there permanently so that this never occurs again. I pick up my trimmer and other equipment and accompany her across the street, pleased that at least one adult in my life is willing to assist rather than sabotage me. Back at work, Ryan Brooks invites me into his office and offers me a permanent part-time employment with defined weekly hours and a minor raise. The steadiness allows me to manage my budget rather than scrambling for inconsistent yard job money. Every payday, I can depend on a particular amount to cover my meals and other expenses. He also says that employee discounts extend to groceries, which will make my food budget go much farther. That following week, I was rearranging my room when I noticed Dad searching through my belongings. My bank statements are out of order, and there are fingerprints on the documents in my desk drawer. I approach him about it, and he behaves as if it is his right to know what I am doing with my money because I reside in his home. Daniel's voice lingers in my thoughts as I consider keeping my funds separate. So I go online and set up a prepaid debit card account that only I can access. I transfer the majority of my money and set up direct deposit from work, so my parents can no longer check my income. Daniel stated that documentation is important, and this is an additional layer of security. Someone allegedly approaches Dad directly about the rent problem at church on Sunday morning since he returns home enraged by others chatting about our private affairs. He bangs things around the kitchen, while Mom sits at the table, humiliated and refusing to make eye contact with anybody. She repeating they should never have said anything to anybody, but Dad claims they didn't, implying someone else is speaking. I sit in my room and listen to them dispute over who found out and how to deal with the stories that are now circulating in their social circles. Mrs. Carter sets a mediation meeting at the school on the following Wednesday with my parents, herself, and a district social worker. We all sit around a conference table, and the social worker explains that her role is to assist us in reaching a mutually beneficial arrangement. My parents instantly start complaining about how rude I have been and how I refuse to aid the family at difficult times. Dad brings up every perceived slight from the previous month, while Mom agrees and adds her own instances. The social worker listens intently before redirecting by asking what particular help my parents presently give. The room becomes silent as they try to mention genuine expenses outside the roof over my head. The social worker inquires about food, clothes, and school supplies, and my parents respond vaguely about teaching responsibilities. She asks me directly what I buy for myself, and I detail everything while my parents sit there, looking uncomfortable. After about 45 minutes of back and forth, we strike a temporary deal in which I will not pay rent for the time being, but will contribute by doing additional jobs around the house. The social worker documents everything in detail, including which duties, how frequently, and what my parents agree to offer in exchange. She prints copies for all of us and says, "This is a working agreement we'll revisit in a month." My parents sign it, looking unhappy but agreeable, and I grab my copy, knowing that this piece of paper would provide me with something formal to point to if they try to change the terms later. A few days later, I'm driving home from school and notice Dad packing his golf clubs into someone's car in the driveway. He passes over the clubs and accepts payment from the buyer before watching the automobile drive away with a sorrowful expression on his face. Inside, he is counting money at the kitchen table, and I hear him say something about paying the credit card company before they sue him. He doesn't ask me for money for the entire week, which seems like progress, even though I can sense he's sad over losing his golf equipment. Mom surprises everyone by saying that she has been recruited to work part-time at a retail business in the mall. She starts the next Monday and returns home that first day moaning about standing for 6 hours straight and dealing with nasty clients. Every evening after her shifts, she complains about being fatigued and her feet hurting. But it's strange seeing her work for the first time in years. The additional money is beneficial since we are eating cheaper meals at home more frequently instead of buying takeout. Mom cooks spaghetti with basic sauce, rice and beans, and inexpensive chicken meals. It isn't glamorous, but it means I won't be hiding in my room eating peanut butter sandwiches while they dine at the restaurant. I actually sit at the table with them throughout supper, which hasn't occurred in ages. Mom and I find ourselves alone in the kitchen one evening, cleaning dishes while Dad watches TV. She's scrubbing a pot and suddenly remarks that her parents were quite tight about money while she was growing up. She claims they made her account for every dime and never allowed her to buy anything pleasurable. It's not an apology, and she makes no reference to how she's treated me, but it's the closest she's ever been to explaining why she behaves the way she does. I just nod and continue drying the dishes since I don't know what to say. Dad receives a call for an interview at a warehouse across town, and his entire demeanor shifts. For the first time in weeks, he appears optimistic, discussing wages and perks while browsing the company's website. The anxiety in the house eases slightly as we wait to hear if he advanced to the next round. I used part of my funds to send my lawnmower to the repair shop since the engine has been acting strange. The man fixes it, and I buy better, longer-lasting equipment, a new trimmer and other professional-grade tools. Mrs. Parker sees me unloading everything and offers to let me organize her garage so that all of my business materials are in one location and easily accessible. We spent Saturday afternoon putting up shelves and hanging tools on the wall. She labels everything and even creates a scheduling board so I can see which clients want care each week. At work, Ryan Brooks begins teaching me about payroll and taxes during slow hours when there are few clients. He tells me how to read my pay stub and discusses the withholdings and deductions. He discusses budgeting tactics and how to plan for large costs. He treats me like a true adult employee rather than a child, which feels fantastic after years of being regarded as a burden at home. Daniel calls to check in and see how things are doing with my folks. I inform him about the mediation agreement, and he suggests we make a safety plan in case they try to push me out anyhow. He instructs me to write down Mrs. Parker's phone number, Mrs. Carter's mobile phone number, and the location of a juvenile shelter downtown. He tells exactly what to do if I return home and the locks have been changed or my belongings are vanished. Knowing I have a strategy makes me feel less anxious about what may occur. My parents began cooking at home more frequently. And one day, I realize the pantry's lock is missing. Mom really asks whether I want anything special from the grocery store the next time she visits, which is bizarre. I almost can't believe this is happening. She notes that I favor wheat bread and a certain type of peanut butter. It seems unusual yet fantastic to be able to eat like a normal child. Then I pass by the kitchen counter and notice the cable bill sitting there, with the payment amount highlighted. When I pick it up, I find that the sports package that Dad had canceled a few weeks prior has been reinstated. They're already reverting to their old spending habits after making so much progress by selling the golf clubs and reducing costs. The cost is about $70 more than it was, and they have not even addressed it to me. I put the paper down and walk back to my room, feeling the old irritation rise in my chest. They can't help themselves, even though they should be acquiring better money management skills. A few days later, I'm doing schoolwork in my room when I hear loud noises from the kitchen. Dad is angry over the bank issuing an overdraft warning, and Mom's voice grows louder, stating she had no idea the account was that low. I open my door and hear Dad accuse her of overspending at Target, while she responds with his bar tab from last weekend. They go back and forth, recounting every purchase the other person made, with neither accepting responsibility for their own expenses. The dispute lasts approximately 45 minutes before they both storm off to their own rooms, and I realize they have learnt nothing from the previous several weeks. The next morning, Dad approaches me before school and begins discussing how the home costs are rising. He thinks I should start contributing since the bills are too much for the two of them to bear. I take out my phone and show him a snapshot of our written agreement from the mediation meeting, the one that states no rent until I am 17. He goes crimson in the face, but I remain calm and inform him that we have already agreed on conditions. He mutters something about ungrateful children and goes away, but I can see he has other plans. That evening, Mom approaches me in the hallway with a phony, cheery look and begins discussing a new method she devised. She suggests that instead of calling it rent, we utilize chore credits, in which I earn points for domestic activities that contribute toward covering bills. I stare at her for a second before responding. That sounds exactly like rent with extra steps. And the answer remains no. Her grin fades and she huffs off to whine to Dad about how tough I am. I walk to my room and write Daniel about what just transpired. He answers within minutes, telling me to start documenting everything in detail. I open a new note on my phone and start writing down what food is now in the cabinets, when time my parents bought pizza for supper while I ate cereal, and images of the money they left on the counter to demonstrate their spending habits. Daniel responded, "If we need to escalate the situation, having solid evidence will protect you from their version of events." Every day, I make records, noting when they order takeaway, when the pantry contains food that I may use, and any comments they make about money or my alleged commitments. The documenting makes me feel less helpless since I'm creating a record of what actually happens rather than what they pretend. 3 days later, I'm at school when Mrs. Carter summons me to her office and displays an email she's writing to my parents. The message is professional and kind, but the warning is clear. If the agreed-upon requirements of our mediation are breached in any manner, she must file a formal report with Child Welfare Services. She asks whether I'm good with her mailing it, and I say yes, knowing my parents would be outraged but also understanding they need this boundary maintained by someone in charge. She presses submit as I'm sitting there, and I watch the email escape into the ether, bound for my parents' inbox, where it will undoubtedly spark an explosion. That Saturday, I was working my shift at the grocery store, replacing shelves in the cereal aisle, when I noticed Dad walking through the front doors. My stomach lowers because he's not here to shop, judging by the furious expression on his face and the way he scans the store for me. He notices me and goes straight over, his voice rising as he rants about how I'm making them look like bad parents and turning everyone against them. Customers are stopping to stare, and I can feel my face flaming with humiliation as he continues to shout about ingratitude and contempt. Ryan Brooks emerges from the back room and goes forward gently, putting himself between me and Dad. He informs my father, in a forceful but courteous tone, that he must leave the store. Dad starts claiming that he has the right to speak to his own daughter. Ryan does not back down. He just emphasizes that he must go immediately or Ryan will contact the police for making a disturbance. Dad appears to want to dispute further, but something in Ryan's expression causes him to spin around and rush out, throwing the door wide so forcefully that it smacks against the wall. I'm shaking so much that I have to sit on a step stool, and Ryan and Jessica walk over to check on me. Ryan responds, "You did nothing wrong, and we have your back completely," as Jessica takes out the incident report form and begins writing down everything that happened, including timings and details. She informs me, matter-of-factly, that if Dad returns to the business, they will not hesitate to contact the police for trespassing. Knowing they're serious about protecting me makes me feel more secure than I have in months. After my shift, I went directly to Mrs. Carter's house because she provided me her address for emergencies. I tell her everything about the shop incident. Her expression becomes more disturbed as I speak, and when I finish, she says she has to file that complaint with child welfare right away, since my father coming up to my employment to confront me crosses a significant line. The next day, a woman called Ms. Donovan contacts my mobile phone and presents herself as a caseworker, stating that she wants to organize a house visit to examine the issue. My entire body feels chilled and relieved since I sought assistance, but I'm also concerned about what occurs next, and whether this will exacerbate the situation. Ms. Donovan organizes the visit for Thursday afternoon, saying she'll need to talk with me privately, check the house and go over some financial information with my parents. When I notify my parents about the visit, they jump into panic mode. Mom begins deep cleaning each area as if we were prepared for a military inspection, scouring baseboards and arranging closets that had not been touched in years. Dad advises her on what to say, preparing responses about how they offer everything I need and saying that I'm overreacting to regular family arguments. I listen to them practice their version of events and decide not to participate in any of it. When Ms. Donovan arrives on Thursday, I want to give her the truth gently and let her form her own judgments based on facts rather than my parents' spin. Thursday arrives, and Ms. Donovan arrives on time. A lady in her 40s with a professional but kind approach, carrying a tablet and briefcase. She starts by asking all three of us basic questions about our household and daily habits. She then begs to talk with me alone in my room. I show her my budget notebook, my documentation of food availability and spending habits, and bill photographs from my phone. She doesn't appear startled or judgmental. She just takes notes and asks clarifying questions about particular incidences and timings. After speaking with me for over an hour, she goes through the house room by room, inspecting the pantry and fridge and taking her own photographs. Finally, she sits down with my parents in the living room, and I am invited to join them. Ms. Donovan speaks plainly and clearly, informing my parents that charging rent to a minor kid is wrong and may constitute neglect of their legal obligations. She says that they must guarantee that I have regular access to food and other essentials, and she will be monitoring the situation through follow-up visits. My parents nod and agree to everything she says, their faces a combination of shame and disdain, but I can tell they understand she's not offering suggestions, she's establishing rules they must obey. Ms. Donovan packs her tablet and folder and proceeds to the door, my parents following her with tight grins. The moment her car pulls away from the curb, her phony friendliness vanishes. Mom rushes directly to the cupboard and removes the lock without saying anything, throwing it away with more force than required. Dad takes out his phone and begins reading through employment postings while sitting at the kitchen table, his mouth tight. Neither of them looks at me or recognizes what has happened, but I can feel their rage permeating every part of the home. Over the following several days, they buy food and put them where I can find them, but they arrange the goods in a planned manner, as if they want me to know they're only doing this because they have to. Mom sighs loudly every time she puts food in the fridge, while Dad mutters under his breath about government overreach and individuals who don't mind their own business. The rent contract disappears off the counter, but no one discusses it, as if pretending it never existed could somehow resolve the matter. I maintain my paperwork up to date nevertheless, taking images of the open pantry and stocked fridge in case things change again. 2 weeks after Ms. Donovan's visit, Dad begins his warehouse work on the night shift loading trucks. He departs for work around 9 p.m. He returns home at 6 a.m., resting the most of the day before waking up to eat dinner and go again. Everything he does reflects his fatigue, from his slower movements to how he falls asleep on the couch before his alarm goes off. The good news is that he's too weary to start conflicts over money or anything else, making the nights more peaceful than they've been in months. Mom appears pleased to have him out of the home at night, and she stops walking on eggshells, waiting for the next argument to begin. I returned home from school one afternoon to find Mom seated at the kitchen table, worksheets spread out in front of her. She notes that her work provides free financial literacy seminars during lunch breaks, and she has decided to attend one. The spreadsheets include basic budgeting, cost tracking, and saving objectives, all of which I learned years ago out of need. But seeing Mom actively engaged with the content and taking notes surprised me because she has never exhibited an interest in money management before. She asks me a few questions about how I track my business's income and spending, and for the first time, we have a normal talk about money without anybody becoming defensive or upset. It doesn't solve everything, but it feels like a modest step towards something better. My daily routine will settle into a regular rhythm during the following month. I get up, go to school, work my afternoon shift at the grocery store, return home to finish schoolwork, do my allotted duties, and go to bed at a fair hour. The consistency means I'm no longer always weary, and my grades are gradually returning to where they were before the stress. Teachers note the change, and a few express their delight to see me performing better. I'm not always calculating how to stretch $25 or wondering if there'll be food when I get home. Life isn't ideal, and my parents still scarcely communicate with me beyond basic domestic tasks, but it's predictable, and I can concentrate on school and job without constantly managing crises. Mrs. Parker texted me on Saturday morning, asking if I wanted to spend the weekend at her house to rest and decompress. She claims her husband is visiting his sister and she would appreciate the companionship. Plus, she is aware that things have been stressful in my place. I ask my parents and expect them to make a huge issue about it, but Dad simply shrugs and says, "All right," and Mom nods without looking up from her budgeting spreadsheet. I pack a suitcase and stroll over to Mrs. Parker's house that afternoon, feeling lighter as I move away from my own front door. The weekend turned out to be just what I needed. 2 days of watching movies, assisting Mrs. Parker with some gardening work and eating meals without any stress in the air. She doesn't ask about my home situation, but she makes it clear that I'm welcome at her house whenever I need a break. Sunday evening, I return home feeling utterly energized and prepared to face whatever comes next. About 2 weeks later, Ms. Donovan arrives for her follow-up visit and sits with all three of us in the living room. She goes over her notes from the initial visit and asks specific questions regarding food access, my academic achievement, and home costs. My parents respond graciously, showing her the open pantry, filled refrigerator, and Mom's budget spreadsheets. Ms. Donovan is happy with the progress, but she reminds everyone that the case remains open for further monitoring, and she plans to check in on a regular basis over the next few months. After she goes, my parents resume their silent displeasure, but they make no changes, apparently knowing that Ms. Donovan was not giving suggestions. I met with Mrs. Carter for lunch one day to discuss my plans for junior and senior year. She cites a dual enrollment program, which allows high school students to take college classes at the community college while both receiving high school and college credit. The program covers tuition and provides subsidies for books and transportation. Mrs. Carter assists me in filling out the application immediately in her office and produces a good reference letter showcasing my work ethic and academic progress. I submit everything before the deadline and try not to get my expectations up too high, but the prospect of getting a head start on college while still in high school seems like just the chance I need. About a week after I submit the application, Mom approaches me in the kitchen and asks if I might lend them money for an unforeseen auto repair. Dad stands behind her, nodding, and they both have the same frantic expression I remember from when Dad first lost his job. I inform them I can draft a formal loan agreement outlining the amount, interest rate, and payback period so that everyone is on the same page. I take out my laptop and begin typing a simple contract while they watch. Their looks morph from optimistic to uneasy, and Dad eventually replies, "Never mind. We'll figure something else out." They walk away, and I keep the blank loan agreement form for future use, knowing that putting everything in paper protects both them and me. The next weekend, I notice the large TV has disappeared from the living room. Mom adds that they sold it to help pay off their credit card debt, and Dad canceled the costly sports package permanently. The living room appears empty without the large screen, and I can tell they both despise having made these modifications. But it's actual progress toward getting their finances in order, even if they plainly despise every step. Dad moans about missing his games, while Mom often emphasizes how little the old TV in their bedroom is in comparison to what they previously had. I don't mention that these are the types of sacrifices I've been making since I was 12, since it would just spark another battle. 2 months after completing my application, I receive an email informing me that I have been accepted into the dual enrollment program and would receive a full scholarship to cover my books and transportation fees. Beginning next September, I'll spend my mornings taking college classes at the community college and my afternoons completing high school prerequisites. The acceptance letter offers details on course choices and orientation dates. I print it out and present it to my parents, thinking they will be proud or at least recognize it as an accomplishment. Dad looks at it and says, "That's good," while Mom nods and explains how it will save them money for education later. Their reactions sting a little since this is a huge event and I worked hard to make it happen, but I'm learning not to look for affirmation from them. A week later, we all sit down at the kitchen table with a written paper that clearly states everything. No rent until I turn 17. My responsibilities include taking out the garbage on Tuesdays and Thursdays, doing my own washing, and assisting with meal preparation 3 evenings each week. Food access implies that the pantry and refrigerator remain unsecured, allowing me to consume whatever is available without seeking permission. My employment income belongs to me, and I am not obliged to contribute to home expenses. Mom reads it again, and Dad moves in his chair, appearing uncomfortable, but he does not object. We all sign at the bottom, and I take a photo with my phone before Mom drives me to school to give Mrs. Carter the original for her files. Mrs. Carter takes it over and approves before storing it in a folder with my name on it. She instructs me to notify her immediately if anything changes or if my parents attempt to amend the conditions without my consent. The next Thursday, we eat supper together at the normal time, with baked chicken and rice cooked by Mom using store-bought ingredients. Dad discusses a situation in the warehouse with a forklift that broke down. Mom describes a tough customer at her retail job who wanted to return an item without a receipt. I tell them about a quiz I performed well on in history class, and a new client who wants weekly lawn treatment beginning in the spring. Nobody screams, mentions money, or makes disparaging remarks about my clothes or meals. It's not warm, and we're not laughing or sharing deep thoughts, but we're sitting together, eating a meal, and chatting about ordinary things with no stress in the air. After supper, I assist load the dishwasher as per the arrangement, and then retire to my room to complete my schoolwork. Looking ahead, I sense something I haven't felt in years: cautious hope for my circumstances. Mrs. Carter checks in regularly, and Ms. Donovan does monthly house visits. I have a clear path to college thanks to the dual enrollment program, which begins next autumn. Even though they still detest the scrutiny, my parents are better at managing their money now that someone is keeping them accountable. I've learned to stand up for myself when required, and that asking for help does not imply weakness or helplessness. Things aren't great with my parents, and they probably never will be, but I'm forging a future that doesn't rely on them being constant or abruptly changing personalities. Given where we started, that seems to be the best end I could hope for. My father uninvited me from my sister's wedding, then he called in panic when I revealed I owned every wedding vendor. I was at my home studio when my folks phoned. There are not enough seats for everyone at the wedding. Cuts had to be made, and you were among them. You understand, correct? I took a big breath, but I'd already written a speech, and my airfare cost $750. It is non-refundable. Lucas. My father's voice sliced through like a dagger. This is a formal occasion. People eat with many forks. Your sister's CEO pals will be there, and we understand that crowds make you uneasy. Dad, I'm 29. Remember to eat before you contact us back. You feel irritable when you're hungry. Beep. He hung up. My chest was filled with chilly dread. I dropped out of film school 7 years ago, and they still couldn't pretend I was important. An hour later, I received another call. It was their wedding planner. Mr. Lucas, this is Hannah from Wedding Love. I am phoning concerning your sister's wedding next month. Your family contacted us regarding certain modifications. My stomach sank. What type of changes? They've removed you totally off the guest list, but they've also asked that we keep your $55,000 payment for the videography package. Your mother stated that the family had already earmarked those monies for other wedding expenditures. I insisted on paying for the videography package so that I could give my sister something unique. My hands were shaking now, but not out of despair. Hannah, I need to ask you something. What is the name of your wedding venue? The Horizon Estate is located downtown. Why? And who owns the property? I heard papers shifting. It is classified under Vision Media Group. My voice was steady now. How about the catering company? Silver Fork Catering, although I'm not sure why. She paused. Wait, it is also Vision Media Group. Keep going, the florist, DJ, and limousines. Her respiration quickened as I said each name. Mr. Lucas, are you telling me that I own every vendor for this wedding? Every single one. The words felt odd coming out. 7 years of making people believe I was struggling while discreetly building $1 million company in advertisements. 7 years later, you obtain a real job, and we recall what occurred at your prom as if I were still the awkward adolescent who stomped on Sarah's friend's dress. Cancel everything, I murmured gently, every contract and every reservation. Send my parents an itemized bill that outlines exactly what their actual budget should cover. They can retain my videography deposit because they've already spent it. But sir, the wedding is in 4 weeks. There are 150 guests. Then they should start making calls. After I hung up, I sat in my studio, surrounded by equipment that they dismissed as an expensive hobby. My phone vibrated with a text from Mom. Lucas, we have made our decision. Nonetheless, the invitation included a clothing code. We understand how difficult those are for you. When you obtain a real job, you'll comprehend these choices. Do not contact your sister, I typed back. Understood. Good luck with the merchants. I was retrieving film from a disk when my phone burst with calls. I didn't recognize Mom, Dad, or my sister's numbers. I allowed them to ring till Dad phoned for the 6th time. Lucas. His voice had lost all of its cockiness. He was scared and nearly screamed. Every vendor has just canceled. The location, the caterer, and everyone. There's been a catastrophic error. Make no mistake, Dad. They all work for me. The hush was so perfect that I could hear him breathing. That is impossible. You produce little videos, you are hardly able to afford. I create advertisements for Nike, Dad. Every vendor you recruited reports to me. We can figure it out. You're still family. Family? I laughed. You were scared an hour ago that I wouldn't be able to handle numerous forks. Lucas. Don't be too sensitive. You know, we only want the finest. No, Dad. You desire a wedding that you cannot afford. The phone rang again. This time it was my sister. I nearly didn't respond, but something made me pick up. Lucas. Her voice was little and broken. She was weeping so hard she couldn't talk. What's happening? Mom and Dad are yelling. The venue phoned me personally. They stated everything was canceled. My rage subsided a little. Did you know they didn't invite me? What? Number. Mom mentioned that you had a major shoot that weekend and couldn't make it. Her sobbing became louder. I closed my eyes and felt the weight of what I'd done. They also retained my $55,000 deposit. They said they'd already spent it. $55,000. Lucas. Oh my God. I did not know. All of this was new to me. She was hiccuping now. That's how Mother used to do it when we were kids. Can you put it back? What about the vendors? My voice cracked. I apologize. But they have to learn. They can't keep treating me like way anymore. 7 years of being treated as if I were a child who couldn't use forks. But this is my wedding, she murmured. I had to pick between teaching my parents a lesson and celebrating my sister's most important day. I sat there gazing at my phone screen, Olivia's sobs running through my brain like a never-ending loop. My finger lingered over Isabella's contact, and I knew that whatever I did next would permanently affect my relationship with my family. My chest was still full with heated and stinging wrath. But now it was accompanied by the sound of my younger sister wailing over a disaster she had not caused. I hit the call button before I could reconsider my decision. Isabella answered the first ring, perhaps anticipating more chaos. I advised her to wait 24 hours before issuing the cancellation notification so I could freeze everything while I decided what to do. She seemed relieved, said she'd suspend any vendor conversations, but warned me that some of them had already inquired about what was going on. I assured her I'd give her a definitive decision by tomorrow morning and hung up, feeling like someone had dropped a rock on my chest. I spent the next hour pacing around my studio, moving back and forth between the equipment racks and editing stations. My phone continued beeping on the desk, alerting me to incoming calls. I kept looking at it and seeing my father's name. 7 more attempts in 40 minutes. I let every single one go to voicemail because I wanted room to ponder without his worry or manipulation interfering with my thoughts. The studio felt different today. with all the cameras, lights, and equipment my parents disregarded as pricey toys. This equipment has paid for itself 100 times over. They had developed a business that they had no idea existed. And here I was, using it as leverage in a family conflict I never wanted to fight. Around midnight, I finally had myself listen to my father's voicemails. I sat at my desk, put the phone on speaker, and played them in order. The first one was enraged, his voice tense and accusatory, stating I was silly and childish. The second one was perplexed, wondering how this could have happened and demanding an explanation. By the fourth message, his tone had changed to anxious, even frantic, as he discussed how much money they'd already spent and how tough it would be to locate new suppliers so close to the wedding date. On the 8th try, he said we could talk about it like grown-ups because we were family, and family works things out. The irony struck me hard, coming from someone who treated me like a kid that morning and hung up when I tried to justify my travel. What struck me the most was that in none of those communications did he apologize or admit they had made a mistake. It was always about the problem I'd made, the mess I was making, not what they'd done to generate it. I erased all of the voicemails and phoned Lucas, even though it was late. He answered on the second ring, which didn't surprise me given that he was used to my unusual hours while we were finalizing assignments. I recounted the entire issue to him, from the uninvitation to the deposit to the fact that I had just threatened to ruin my own sister's wedding. He listened without interrupting, and when I finished, there was a long pause before he said, "We needed to think about the business implications, beyond just the family stuff." Lucas explained that if word spread that Vision Media Group had pulled contracts for personal reasons, it could seriously harm our reputation with other clients. He was not mistaken, and I knew it. We'd spent years creating a reputation for dependability and professionalism, and this appeared to be neither. We decided to meet first thing in the morning at the workplace to explore possibilities for protecting both my boundaries and the company's brand. I eventually fell asleep about 3:30 a.m. and awoke at 7:30 to my phone beeping non-stop on the nightstand. I received 17 new text messages, the most of which were from my mother. I browsed through them while lying in bed, watching her tactics change from message to message. The first ones were hostile, labeling me selfish and theatrical. The middle ones used guilt, claiming that I was hurting my sister's happiness and spoiling what should have been her finest day ever. The final several went further, claiming that this wasn't who they taught me to be, that families don't treat each other like this, and that I was being cruel because of wounded sentiments. The irony of the final line nearly made me laugh out loud. They didn't raise me to be successful either, but here I was operating a $1 million business they had no idea about. Lucas and I had a conference room meeting with Nathan at work that morning. Our company attorney set out all of the vendor contracts on the table and went through them one by one. He stated that legally, I had the right to terminate anything because Vision Media Group controlled the contracts. But he also said something I hadn't considered. Some of the contracts included penalty provisions that would cost my organization real money if we pulled out. We were looking at up to $18,000 in fees and missed deposits for Vision Media Group to cover, in addition to the $55,000 my parents had already invested. Nathan also cautioned me about the consequences of having a family feud spill over into corporate operations. He indicated that if I opted to reinstate the vendors, we required detailed documentation distinguishing this circumstance from typical business operations. We spent an hour discussing how to develop a written policy about conflicts of interest and contracts with family members to avoid such disasters in the future. My phone rang again while we were still in the meeting, and the screen displayed Liam's name. I genuinely liked Olivia's fiancé. He'd always been easy to talk to, and he'd never believed my parents' narrative about my work being a joke. I left the conference room to accept the call. He asked if we might meet for coffee that afternoon, just the two of us, to discuss what was going on. His voice was calm and steady, not angry or accusing, but just sensible. I said okay, and we agreed on a time of 3:30 at a coffee shop near my studio. Liam arrived right on schedule, looking exhausted yet calm. We picked a quiet corner table and I discussed the mediation approach that Nathan had proposed. He listened without interrupting and stated that he believed it was wise that Olivia needed this type of organized talk as well. He promised to speak with her that evening and get back to me. I drove back to my studio and opened my laptop to write the email requesting mediation. My fingers hesitated over the keyboard for a full minute before I began typing. I kept it brief and clear, stating that Nathan had recommended Shirley, a professional mediator, to assist us have a meaningful talk about what happened and how to proceed. I stated that I wanted to discover a route that would benefit everyone, but that we required clear communication and mutual respect to get there. I copied Olivia, my parents, Lucas and Nathan so that everyone got the same information. My finger trembled slightly as I pushed the submit button. Liam's response arrived within 5 minutes. He stated that he and Olivia were both eager to participate and appreciated my initiative. Olivia wrote a separate message 10 minutes later, expressing her relief and hope that this might help. Then I waited. My parents' response took 6 hours to arrive, just after 9 p.m. My mother had written it, and I could sense her hesitancy in each word. She stated that although this seemed excessive for a family disagreement, they would attend if it meant resolving the situation. The fact that she still referred to it as a quarrel rather than accepting what they had done informed me precisely how much effort this would entail. I emailed all replies to Nathan and requested him to contact Shirley to schedule the sessions. He responded the next morning, stating Shirley wanted to meet with me separately before the family session. We booked it for 2 days in her downtown office. I arrived 10 minutes late for my solo session with Shirley due to traffic. Her workplace was in a contemporary structure with glass walls and minimalist furnishings that exuded both professionalism and comfort. Shirley was probably in her 50s, with short gray hair and piercing eyes that could see right through anything you were putting up. She shook my hand firmly and motioned to the chair across from her desk. She began by outlining her methodology and asking what I expected from mediation. I gave her the typical response about wanting my parents to view me as an adult and appreciate my job choices. She nodded and took a note before gazing up at me with those keen eyes and asking if I really wanted a connection with my parents, or if I was simply searching for vindication. The question impacted me harder than I anticipated. I sat there for a bit, thinking about it, before telling her honestly that I didn't know. I said that I wanted them to perceive me as capable and successful, while also acknowledging that they had injured me, but I wasn't sure whether they were capable of such a transformation. I told her about 7 years of being dismissed and treated as if I couldn't manage fundamental adult circumstances. She asked specific questions about my business, the prom event that they kept bringing up, and my connection with Olivia. By the end of the hour, I believed she had grasped the entire magnitude of the problem. She said she'd meet with my parents next, then Olivia and Liam, before we all gathered for the first group session. The first mediation session was set 4 days after I canceled the vendors, leaving only 12 days before the wedding date. I got at Shirley's office 15 minutes early and waited in my car, trying to calm down. Olivia and Liam arrived a few minutes later, and we stepped inside together. My parents were already arrived, sitting in the waiting room with their arms crossed and matching faces of distress. Shirley escorted us into a bigger conference room with a circular table, forcing us to face each other. My folks sat to one side. I sat immediately opposite from them, while Olivia and Liam sat slightly to the side. Shirley sat at the head of the table and began by establishing ground rules for courteous communication and taking turns speaking without interruption. She underlined that we were here to talk about specific actions and their consequences, not to criticize one another's characters. My father hardly let her finish before stepping in. He said that the entire thing had been blown out of proportion, and that they had made a sensible seating selection that I took too personally. Shirley raised her hand and interrupted him in mid-sentence. She advised him to focus on the facts rather than his perceptions of my behavior. When she asked him to explain the specifics of what they decided and why, he moved in his seat and looked at my mother. Then he acknowledged they didn't invite me because they were scared I'd be uncomfortable among Olivia's business ties, which would reflect negatively on the family. The words remained in the air between us. I felt my chest tighten, but I pushed myself to remain cool and ask him directly what he meant by reflect poorly. He struggled through an explanation about formal gatherings, social expectations, and knowing what to say. My mother rushed in to support him, claiming they were attempting to shield me from an unpleasant scenario similar to the prom event years before. Shirley inquired about the prom incident, and I had to explain that when I was 17, I accidentally trod on my date's friend's dress and tore it. My parents supposedly used that against me for nearly a decade as proof that I couldn't handle formal social situations. Olivia's voice pierced through the tension, shaky yet forceful. She stated she had no clue they were still obsessed with prom, and that using a teenage mistake to explain not inviting me to her wedding was ridiculous. Liam instantly backed her up, pointing out that his family had never raised any reservations about my attendance, and that my parents appeared to be projecting their own anxieties onto the issue. Shirley switched the subject to the $55,000 deposit, and I noticed my mother's face turn pale. She attempted to explain that they viewed it as family money contributing to a family celebration, and that they had previously allocated those amounts to the venue improvements and culinary additions. I kept my voice calm as I explained that it was my money from my business, given as a particular gift for videography, and they had no right to reroute it without my permission. My father became protective, claiming that if I was truly successful, I wouldn't miss $55,000. Shirley asked him how he would feel if $55,000 was taken from him without his permission, regardless of his financial status. He had no decent explanation for it. The stillness stretched uncomfortably, yet it seemed essential. We spent the next hour discussing each individual point of hurt and misunderstanding. Shirley maintained our attention on specific activities, rather than character assaults. My parents began to admit some of their mistakes, but they continued to excuse everything with their intentions. Shirley emphasized that effect is more important than goal, and that their actions wounded me regardless of what they intended to accomplish. By the end of the session, we hadn't settled anything solid, but Shirley had persuaded my parents to commit to a second session and to seriously consider my situation. She assigned them homework to write precisely exactly what they did that was harmful and what they might have done differently. She also assigned me homework, which included writing down what a feasible way ahead looked like and what I was ready to compromise on. We all walked out of her office without speaking, and I waited in my car for 10 minutes before starting the engine. I drove home on autopilot, my hands holding the wheel more tightly than required. Back in my studio, I picked out the homework project Shirley had given me and gazed at the blank sheet for almost 20 minutes. The question was straightforward, but I kept going around it. What did I genuinely want out of all this? I began writing, and the words flowed faster than I anticipated. I wanted people to perceive me as someone who mattered. Not as the awkward prom kid who couldn't handle formal meals. The wedding itself seems almost beyond the point now. It was about whether my parents could recognize me as an adult with a respectable work and life. I outlined my conditions in bullet points. A real apology that admitted what they had done wrong. A repayment plan for $55,000 that includes exact figures and dates. A vow to treat me with basic respect in the future, which meant no more remarks. About my profession or capacity to function at formal gatherings. I stared over the list and felt a settling in my chest. These were not unreasonable expectations. They were just boundaries that every adult earned. The next day, I went over the list 3 times, ensuring sure each item was clear and explicit. I did not want vague pledges to do better. I needed tangible acts that they could really carry out. By the second mediation session, I had printed out my homework and marked the important passages. Shirley's workplace seemed different this time. My parents came just on time, both carrying files that were strangely prepared. We took the same seats as previously with the same anxiety in the air, but something had changed somewhat. Shirley began by asking my parents to share what they had written. My mother went first, bringing out numerous handwritten pages that astonished me. She had truly thought about this. She stated the invitation without attempting to soften it or make excuses. She wrote about taking the deposit without requesting permission, which was improper regardless of their intentions. She included critical comments about my profession, comparisons to Olivia's CEO buddies, and repeated reminders of prom as if I were still 17. Her voice trembled slightly when she read, and I could see her hands shaking on the pages. My father's list came next, and it was substantially shorter. He typed it on his phone, and the wording was sloppy, but he did admit that they should have consulted me before finalizing wedding plans. He stated that they had formed assumptions about my business without asking any questions. His speech was more defensive than my mother's. Lots of language like, in hindsight, and perhaps we could have. But at least he said something. Shirley allowed the stillness to stay for a time after they had finished reading. She then asked them specifically what they could have done differently in each case. My mother spoke first, her voice steadier now. She claimed they should have been open about their worries rather than making up reasons like large productions and seating arrangements. She revealed that they were concerned about being judged by Olivia's professional group, and that they had pushed their concerns onto me rather than dealing with it directly. She mentioned how they had formed a vision of the ideal family in their minds, and I didn't match that image because I dropped out of film school. My father said, after a long pause, that they should have inquired about my business rather than presuming I was struggling. He hesitantly admitted that they'd always saw me as the awkward adolescent from prom rather than the adult I'd grown into. He added that they had never truly updated their mental image of who I was. Shirley agreed and took notes before asking them why they believed shifting that mental picture had been so tough. My mother's remark astonished me. She said that they had become accustomed to being ashamed about me. And habits are difficult to break, even if you know they are incorrect. I read my assignment next, my voice seeming calmer than I felt. I said that I needed them to see my career as real and to cease making comments that undercut my accomplishment. I reviewed some of the key customers I'd dealt with in recent years. Nike commercials that ran during primetime sporting events, Apple product launches that millions of people viewed, and big ad agencies that paid 6 figures for my services. I noticed the amazement on their expressions as I named these names. They really hadn't known. I also described what $55,000 meant to me. However, it was not all about money. It was my way of telling Olivia that I was thinking about her and wanted to make her day memorable. Having it stolen without a word was like being eliminated from the family. Like my input was meaningless since I didn't matter. My voice cracked slightly at the last part, but I kept going. I told them I'd spent 7 years constructing something genuine, and they treated me as if I was playing with costly toys. I'd let people think I was suffering because I didn't want to face their judgment. But it was my error. I should have sought recognition rather than concealing my accomplishment. Olivia began weeping before I finished reading. Her shoulders shook with sobbing. Not the peaceful ones she had shed before. Liam handed her tissues, and she attempted to gather her thoughts, but the words came out broken anyhow. She apologized for not sticking up for me before. She said she was so intent on preserving the peace and managing our parents' expectations that she had no idea how horribly they were treating me. She acknowledged she had heard the remarks about my profession throughout the years, but she ignored them as ordinary parental behavior, not realizing how much they totaled up. Liam wrapped his arm around her and talked straight to my parents. He stated that they wanted to make things right and were prepared to scale back the wedding greatly if it meant I was included and valued. He added that his own parents had been concerned about the size and expenditure from the start. They'd rather have something little and intimate. Anyway, Olivia nodded against his shoulder and stated that she had never wanted a large wedding in the first place. That had been our parents' vision, not her own. My parents appeared to have been smacked. My mother's face became pale, and my father shifted in his seat uneasily. Shirley waited until the timing was right to speak. She gently pointed out that their obsession with appearances seems to be at the heart of most of this dispute. The huge wedding was all about dazzling guests. Uninviting me was to avoid embarrassment. Taking the deposit was about sustaining the image they wished to present. She asked them outright if their friendship with me was more important than impressing Olivia's CEO buddies. My mother replied yes instantly, her voice strong. My father waited a while to respond. He stared at me, then at Olivia, and then back at Shirley. He finally replied yes, despite his stiff jaw. Shirley took note and inquired about the practical implications. What aspects of the wedding were they willing to modify in order to promote family bonds above appearance? The stillness stretched out awkwardly, and I could see my parents exchanging looks and engaging in some sort of wordless communication. We spent the remainder of the session working out concrete answers. Nathan joined us by phone, his voice coming through Shirley's speaker with the same professional serenity he usually had. He guided us through the repayment plan alternatives, detailing the various structures and deadlines. We agreed on $55,000 paid back over 2 years via a formal promissory note, with 30 monthly installments of around $1,800 each. Nathan said that this separated the gift and control aspects. They couldn't claim it was family money if they were legally obligated to repay it. The promissory note would be a legitimate contract with actual repercussions if they failed to pay. My mother looked unhappy as Nathan explained the requirements, but she consented. My father asked a few inquiries regarding interest rates and payment schedules in an attempt to negotiate better conditions, but Nathan immediately shut that down. This was not a corporate transaction where they could haggle. This was making up for what they had stolen without authorization. Nathan outlined the legal repercussions of failing to pay a promissory note amongst family members, and my father signed off on it. For the wedding, we decided that I would be treated as a complete guest, with no limits or special requirements. I wouldn't deliver a formal speech since I didn't want the pressure, nor did they. But I would be treated just like any other family member. Olivia spoke up, saying she wanted me at the head table close to her and Constantine. My parents consented without much argument, which seemed like significant progress. My mother even proposed that I sit between her and Olivia so that we could all be together. I appreciated the gesture, even though I knew it was largely to preserve the family image Mom valued so much. But at least this time, the picture included me rather than excluding me. The larger difficulty turned out to be the vendor dilemma. Lucas attended the conference via Shirley's laptop, his face filled the screen with the same intense expression he had when dealing with operational issues. He described the difficulties of resetting everything with only 7 days to the wedding. Some merchants had already scheduled alternate events within those time slots after AITA canceled. The florist had booked a business function. The DJ held a Sweet 16 celebration. The backup photographer had another wedding. We'd need to locate substitutes for at least 3 big vendors, probably 4, depending on the limo company's schedule. Lucas believed that we could recover around 70% of the original design, although some concessions would be required. The time frame was severe, and certain things were simply impossible to duplicate. He opened a spreadsheet that indicated which vendors were available and which were not, color-coded by priority level. My parents appeared concerned as Lucas went through each thing. Olivia stunned everyone when she interrupted Lucas in the middle of his explanation. She stated that she wanted to utilize this as a chance to scale back to the wedding she truly desired. Her voice was firmer now, not as wobbly as before. She and Constantine had discussed this and reached a conclusion jointly. They planned to reduce the guest list from 150 to 80 individuals, focusing on close friends and family rather than business acquaintances or distant relatives they knew little about. They intended to relocate from the enormous Horizon Estate ballroom to the smaller garden venue on the same site. This would make the vendor issue considerably easier because the garden site had a different schedule and required less services. It would also drastically lower expenditures, resulting in less financial hardship for everyone. Constantine instantly backed her up, saying that the adjustment will ease his parents. They'd been concerned about the cost and formality since the beginning. A smaller, more private wedding seemed appropriate for both of them. Shirley turned to my parents and asked them directly whether they could accept Olivia's decision, even if it went against their expectations. The hush dragged on for what seemed like forever. My mother's hands were tightly folded in her lap, and she kept glancing at my father, as if she were waiting for him to speak first. Finally, she responded yes, quietly but clearly. My father took much longer to respond, and when he did, his face looked as if he had just eaten something terrible. But he nodded in agreement. Olivia let out a breath I hadn't realized she'd been holding, and Constantine gripped her palm. Shirley took notes on her pad and stated that she would collaborate with Lucas to arrange the improvements. She then concluded the discussion by telling everyone that this was progress, and that we should recognize it. Lucas called or texted me every couple hours with updates for the following 4 days, so my phone was practically always in my hand. He had his entire crew working on restructuring things, and it was chaotic but in a positive way. The sort where you can see everything coming together. The garden location at Horizon Estate was available, which was ideal, because it was far more manageable than the big ballroom. Xavier got the florist back first, since they had merely accepted a minor corporate position that allowed them to roam about. The DJ decided to uphold the original contract when Xavier explained the issue and offered a discount on future bookings. The photographer was difficult because she had already committed to another wedding on the same day, but Xavier found a replacement who had even better evaluations. The caterer was the only complete loss since they had scheduled a large anniversary celebration. But Xavier discovered an outstanding substitute that Olivia preferred. When he showed her their menu, she was ecstatic with the unique selections available, things like fusion appetizers and unique beverages that the original caterer never proposed. I met with Isabella 3 times that week to completely recreate the videography package. She had all of the original plans, but I told her I wanted to manage the shoot myself rather than sending one of my regular teams. She looked astonished and asked if I was certain because it was family, and things might become tricky. That's exactly why I wanted to handle it myself, because this wedding had gone from being just another celebration to something far more significant. Olivia attended one of these sessions, and we spent the entire day talking over shot lists. She informed me about the most important events for her, such as the first glance with Liam, her mother assisting with the veil, and the toasts during dinner. She continued repeating she couldn't believe I was doing this for her, and I kept assuring her that was what I had planned to do from the beginning, before everything went wrong. My parents sent out the updated guest list, along with a note about trimming back to a more personal event. I saw the email since they copied me, and the phrasing was guarded, as if they didn't want to confess they made a mistake the first time. My mother contacted me the next day, and I could see she was worried about what people might say. Then she said something that astonished me. She claimed Olivia had made the correct decision, and she was not going to argue with her about it. Later that week I caught her on the phone with one of her friends discussing the adjustment, and she seemed pleased of Olivia for understanding what she wanted. It was strange hearing my mother speak in that manner because she typically needed to control everything. But perhaps Shirley's mediation was effective. My dad contacted me 4 days before the wedding, and this time it wasn't about logistics or vendor issues. He inquired about the state of my business, and although I attempted to respond quickly, he declined. He wanted to fully comprehend what I accomplished. So I described how Vision Media Group operated, how I had built up the vendor network, and what kind of commercial projects I worked on. He listened without interrupting, which may have been a first for our relationship. Then he stated that he had never understood my job and had formed assumptions based on his lack of knowledge in the business. He claimed that commercial filming consisted solely of creating YouTube videos or photographing weddings for a low cost. I told him about the Nike commercial and the Apple project, and he kept insisting he had no idea, as if he couldn't believe his kid had created something so successful. It wasn't a full apology, but it was the first time we'd had a serious discussion about my profession in 7 years. I awoke 2 days before the wedding to a long email from my mother. I read it on my phone before getting out of bed. I read it twice more because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. She wrote about how she and my father had been so preoccupied with projecting the ideal family image that they had lost sight of what was truly important. She said they had viewed me as a problem to be solved rather than a kid to be cherished. She admitted that they had made mistakes concerning my career, uninvited me, and taken my money without asking. She stated she wanted to do better in the future and hoped I would give them the opportunity to show it. When I read it, I felt something in my chest relax. Like a knot I'd been holding for years, it finally started to unravel. We held the rehearsal the day before the wedding in the garden site, which was lovely. The setting was intimate and personal in a manner that the large ballroom could never have been. Flowers were already being set up, and the natural light shining through the trees made everything appear gentle and pleasant. My parents arrived looking worried, but they were trying. I could see it. They made no comments regarding the lower size or attempted to suggest adjustments. My father really helped Constantine decide out where everyone should stand during the ceremony. Then he joked about me knowing how to use all of the forks at supper. And for once, it did not feel cruel. It seemed more like he was attempting to admit how ridiculous his fears had been. That evening, the immediate family went to eat at an Italian restaurant near the site. Olivia was more calm than I had seen her in months, as if a weight had been removed from her shoulders. Liam continued praising everyone for being accommodating to the modifications, while my parents kept reiterating it was Olivia's day, and they simply wanted her to be happy. They were quieter as usual, not dominating the conversation as they typically do. My father asked me about a project I was working on and genuinely listened to my response. My mother inquired about my equipment and was genuinely interested as I described the differences between the cameras I used. Sophia drew me aside as I walked to the restroom and told me Olivia had been so much happier since the wedding plans altered. She had previously been anxious and unhappy, but now she was eager about being married. On the morning of the wedding, I arrived to the garden site at 6:30 to set up my camera equipment. The sun was just about to rise, and the light was ideal. That warm golden tint makes everything appear lovely. I wandered about examining angles and arranging photos as Lucas's team did the final touches on the flowers and table decorations. The setting looked wonderful with its natural light and plants. Lucas arrived at 7:30 with coffee and joked about this being the most high-stakes shot. It wasn't simply about I've ever done photographing a wedding anymore. It was about showing my family what I was truly capable of. My parents arrived at 9 o'clock, and my mother immediately went to inspect the flower arrangements and table settings. She continued altering centerpieces in tiny increments and questioning Lucas's staff if the seats were properly situated. However, her voice sounded different than normal, less dominating, and more like she needed to accomplish something with her hands. My father spotted Constantine in the groom's suite and spent 20 minutes assisting him with his boutonniere, making jokes about how he had worn his sideways at his own wedding. I videotaped part of it through the window, not the polished views I'd use in the official video, but the candid moments that showed them attempting to be normal. Constantine chuckled at something my father said, and my father touched him on the shoulder, making it appear as if my father was having a discussion with someone, rather than acting for an audience. I kept the camera rolling while my mother fixed Constantine's tie and complimented him on his appearance. And as she went away, I noticed her frantically wiping her eyes, as if she didn't want others to see. These seemingly insignificant instances felt significant, as if they demonstrated that we were all capable of being kind to one another once we stopped thinking about looks. Olivia emerged from the bridal room at 9:30, and my mother lost it instantly. Before Olivia could even make it through the threshold, tears streamed down her cheeks, and she continued exclaiming how beautiful her baby was while trying not to smear her makeup. I grabbed my camera and filmed my mother assisting with the veil, her hands shaking slightly as she adjusted the cloth and tucked a strand of Olivia's hair back into place. There was something gentle in that moment. Something that made me wonder whether, below all of the status anxiety and control difficulties, my mother really cared about us in her own messed up way. Olivia attracted my attention as my mother fumbled with the veil and smiled at me. "This genuine," I chuckled, but he was not mistaken. Cheerful smile reminded me of when we were children. My father entered in the doorway and simply stood there staring at Olivia for a long time before saying, "She looked perfect." He spotted me shooting and instead of making a joke about my working at my own sister's wedding, he simply nodded. It wasn't quite approbation, but more of a recognition that I was doing something worthwhile. He could see it now. The ceremony began at 10 o'clock, and it was wonderful in terms of simplicity and personalization. 80 people filled the outdoor space without overcrowding, and everyone could see and hear everything that transpired. I strolled between the rows with my camera, photographing how the dawn light filtered through the trees and illuminated Olivia's clothing. Constantine's tears streamed down her cheeks as she walked down the aisle. The way both sets of parents were sobbing out. This is what I do at work. Filming and beautifying people's crucial moments. However, today seemed different because my people, family and sister were getting married. I captured images of Sophia straightening Olivia's train and wiping away her own tears. Constantine's parents held hands during the vows. My father reached over to grasp my mother's hand when Olivia responded, "I do." Every frame was more important than any Nike commercial I'd ever done because this was the day my family began to perceive me as someone important. The event went into the garden pavilion, where guests ate, danced and rejoiced as I continued to shoot. Around midday, my father stepped up to deliver a toast, and I almost put down the camera because I wasn't sure I wanted to film what he was going to say. But then he began talking about both of his children and their successes, giving our real names and explaining our true jobs. For the first time, he specifically identified Vision Media Group. He said he was happy of Olivia for pursuing a profession in finance, and of me for establishing a successful production business, and that both of his children had selected spouses who supported their goals rather than attempting to modify them. It wasn't a complete apology for all that had transpired, and he didn't mention the wedding fiasco or the years of discounting my work. But it was an improvement. He was there in front of 80 people, claiming me as his successful son rather than denying my existence. And that meant something. I kept recording despite the fact that my hands were shaking somewhat. When he finished and everyone applauded, he looked directly at me and lifted his glass. Later in the evening, as things were winding down, Olivia took my arm and drew me away from the crowd. She told me she was glad I hadn't given up on the wedding or the family, and that seeing me establish limits showed her she could do the same. She said that this is why she felt strong enough to cut down to the wedding she really wanted rather than the spectacle our parents were organizing. We hugged, and I realized that maybe there was some good to come out of this catastrophe. She had discovered her voice and learned to say no to things that did not benefit her. And I'd discovered that I didn't have to tolerate being treated as a child simply because we were related. This calamity had forced both of us to mature slightly. As the reception ended, my mother approached me and asked if we could speak quietly. We went away from the pavilion and down the garden path, and she told me she had been thinking about how they had treated me over the years. She said that she and my father had been clinging on to an outmoded idea of who I was, seeing me as the awkward adolescent from prom, rather than the adult I'd grown into. She realized it wasn't fair to me or our relationship, and she wanted to start again with regular dinners where they listened rather than lectured. Her speech was subdued, and she kept staring at the ground rather than at me, as if she was embarrassed to speak all of this aloud. I told her honestly that I was willing to try, but it would take time to re-establish trust. The uninvitation and deposit problem were not unique events. They were part of a 7-year-long habit of contemptuous behavior. Every statement about obtaining a real job, every comparison to Olivia's CEO pals, and every time they treated my profession as a pastime rather than a company had contributed to this wall between us. She nodded, saying she understood and that she and my father were committed to doing the work through ongoing mediation sessions with Shirley. It wasn't a miraculous reunion in which everything instantly turned great, but it was a solid foundation for creating something better. The next week, I received a message on my phone indicating funds had been placed into my company account. I examined and found $3,000 with the remark, "First installment of 30." My parents had made their first payment on the repayment plan without my reminding them or sending Nathan after them, which felt substantial. I conveyed the message to Nathan, who acknowledged receipt and modified the promissory note in our files. Lucas noticed the email correspondence and joked about having all family members sign contracts before any future contacts. And truthfully, it wasn't the worst notion I'd ever heard. Perhaps putting everything in paper would require everyone to be explicit about expectations rather than making assumptions. 3 weeks after the wedding, I completed editing the movie and headed to Olivia and Constantine's apartment to give it. They sat on their couch and watched the entire event, while I stood anxiously near the door. And toward the end, they were both in tears. Olivia thought it was great that I had captured the essence of the day and made it lovely without being artificial. She shared several clips on social media that weekend, with a remark about how private weddings were preferable than large productions. And some of her CEO pals noted that they wished they had done something similar instead of the large festivities they had planned. Liam sent me a long note thanking me for the video and for making the wedding possible at all. We had another family meal a month after the wedding, but this time it was at my studio, allowing my parents to view my workstation. I gave them a tour of the equipment, editing bays, and the little sound stage we utilized for certain shots. They continued asking questions about how things worked. Then I showed them some of my commercial work, including a Nike commercial that was carried nationwide on sports channels. My father kept exclaiming, "You made this," as if he couldn't believe that his son had developed something that was being displayed to millions of people. My mother asked extensive questions regarding the production process, such as how many people were on site, how long it took to film and edit, and how the client approval process worked. It was odd to see them engaged in my work after years of dismissing it as creating small films. But I tried to answer everything honestly and show them what my job truly entailed. They remained for 4 hours, looking at various projects and asking questions. And after they went, my father shook my hand and said he was impressed. It wasn't everything I had hoped for from them, but it was more than I had previously received. At dinner we put up my laptop on the table and spoke with Shirley for our first follow-up. She arrived on screen with her notes and inquired about how everyone was doing with the agreements reached during the mediation. My parents sat stiffly at first, and my father cleared his throat before revealing that they were still adjusting to seeing me as a successful company owner rather than their child who dropped out of film school. My mother added that it was difficult to overcome old habits, but they were trying to catch themselves when they made disrespectful comments. I told Shirley honestly that I was still dealing with years of feeling invisible to them, that the hurt didn't magically go away because we had some good discussions, but I could tell they were trying, and that was important. Shirley agreed and went to her calendar, setting monthly video check-ins for the following 6 months so we could measure progress and address any backsliding before it became a major problem. After the call, my father helped me clear the dinner dishes without asking, which seemed like a minor but major change. Olivia and Constantine returned from their honeymoon in Costa Rica 3 weeks later, and they invited the entire family to see their images. They'd stayed at this lovely environmental resort right on the beach, which they could really afford because we'd drastically reduced the wedding budget. Olivia was showing us images of their private villa and the ziplining trip through the rainforest, and she seemed more calm than I had seen her in months. Constantine checked his phone for texts from wedding guests, and Olivia read a few aloud about how people were telling them it was the finest wedding they'd ever attended to because it seemed so personal and genuine rather than like a business affair. My parents sat on the couch listening, and my mother said she loved the smaller wedding more than she expected since she was able to have genuine talks with individuals rather than making small chat with a large throng. My father nodded, and I could see they were finally understanding that reducing the guest list had been the right decision, even if it wasn't what they had hoped for. 3 months after the wedding, I signed a large contract with a luxury vehicle company to photograph their full spring campaign. The budget was more than anything I'd done previously, and I asked my parents to attend one of the shoot days. They arrived at the downtown site, which we had closed up for 2 blocks to film, and I could see their expressions alter as they saw me oversee a crew of 15 people putting up lighting and cameras and working with the client's creative team. My father stood off to the side, taking it all in, and when the brand's marketing director arrived to discuss shot angles, my father introduced himself and stated that he was my father. The director's face lighted up as she began discussing how satisfied they were with my prior work and how competitive the bidding process had been for this campaign. My father's countenance swung between pride and apparent discomfort, and I could tell he was contemplating how incorrect he had been about my profession all these years. After we finished for the day, my parents lingered to ask questions regarding the production timeline and editing process. And my father kept remarking how professional everything looked, as if he couldn't believe this was actually my work. Several weeks later, at our most recent family meal, my parents brought a wrapped box and placed it on the table in front of me. I opened it and saw a framed photo from Olivia's wedding, one I took at the reception, of all of us together, smiling and calm. My mother's voice was calm when she said they wanted to remember this as a watershed moment for our family. When we decided to be honest with each other instead of pretending everything was all right. She stated that there were still difficult occasions where old tendencies emerged. My father almost said something negative about my job, and she caught herself attempting to maintain everyone's image. But we were creating something more tangible than what we had previously. Something based on genuine respect rather than preconceptions and past wounds. After that, I kept the framed portrait on my studio desk. A reminder that the respect I had strived for was slowly becoming a reality. And it was enough for now. Christmas turned into chaos when my sister threw a glass and accused me of betraying her. I didn't apologize, but I revealed her affair with her ex. My husband Ryan and I discovered I was pregnant in early October after 3 years of trying. We were thrilled but worried because my early miscarriage the year before had crushed us. My doctor stated everything looked okay but advised waiting until after 14 weeks to notify folks for safety. We chose Christmas since the whole family would be together and we'd be 16 weeks. I only informed my brother Ethan and cousin Megan because they knew about the loss and checked on me. They honored their commitment not to inform. My sister Charlotte, 34, has 5 kids and thinks she's the family pregnancy expert. She contacted the week before Christmas to ask about news. I declined, looking forward to meeting everyone. I seemed different recently, so she wondered what was up. I switched to her kids and she let it go, but I could sense she was skeptical. Charlotte cannot conceal knowledge. I told her first when I got into my master's program, because I was thrilled to tell my sister. She contacted our mom an hour later and told her before me. When Ryan proposed, I phoned her sobbing ecstatic tears, and she wrote about it online, tagging our family before I could say anything. She notified everyone at Sunday supper before I came about my promotion. She often claims she can't stop being excited for me, it's about her having knowledge to give. This time Ryan and I agreed not to tell her until everyone knew. I stood up after dinner on Christmas to share an announcement. Our May due date was announced to everyone. Everyone cheered and hugged except Charlotte, who gazed at me. Then she cried. Anger tears. Not happy. She inquired how long I'd known. I responded 8 weeks. She was defeated. She rose up and shouted I had to inform her first. She said I betrayed her by not telling her about all 5 pregnancies first. She stated sisters should share everything and I made her appear foolish. Charlotte turned on my mom and demanded if she knew when she attempted to soothe her. When my mom responded no, Charlotte inquired who knew. Charlotte discovered Megan and Ethan's silence and screamed at them for harboring secrets. She stated her family was against her and distrusted her. My dad advised her to relax and celebrate me. But she replied, how could she be happy when I deliberately excluded her from the most important news? I'd ruined our relationship and she'd never forgive me for making her the last to know. She then accused Ryan of pitting me against my sister. Ryan stated we wanted to make sure everything was okay. Charlotte thought it was foolish since she would have backed me whatever, and now she felt like I didn't consider her family. She replied, real family tells each other everything immediately. Ironic coming from someone who ruined every critical occasion in my life. Finally my brother Ethan observed, maybe if Charlotte could keep her mouth shut for once, people would tell her things. Charlotte flung her wine glass toward the wall, shattering it. My 4-year-old nephew cried. My mother wept. Mark tried to convince Charlotte to go but she refused. She wouldn't go until I apologized for insulting her. I didn't apologize for concealing my announcement. She called me a bad sister and left me. She packed her dishes and urged her kids to fetch their jackets. She was dramatically packing Tupperware into bags when I stepped up and stated, if we were sharing everything like real family, then everyone should know that Charlotte had been texting her ex-boyfriend Daniel for the past 8 months. Mark froze. Charlotte whitened. Silence filled the room. Nobody moved. In 2 seconds, Mark's expression went from perplexed to wounded. His lips opened to speak, but nothing came out. Charlotte's hands shook and her face was paper white. She choked when she tried to speak. Mark took his coat from his chair and started out. Charlotte eventually spoke and said it wasn't what I imagined, I didn't understand. Mark left already. We heard her cry his name in the driveway as she chased him. Her 5 children sat at the table, afraid and bewildered. The youngest, the 4-year-old who cried about the glass, wailed again. My mom ran over to console him, bringing him onto her lap and shushing him. The other 4 youngsters gazed at their plates. My dad was transfixed in his chair, looking if a rock had hit him. Megan stood up and picked up the larger shattered glass off the floor. Ethan glanced at me with wide eyes but said nothing. Ryan grabbed my hand under the table. Charlotte was shouting at Mark outside, pleading with him to wait to explain. Then a vehicle door slammed and an engine started. Charlotte's anguished cries became louder, but the automobile sped away. The street was quiet save for the kids wailing when it disappeared. Charlotte returned inside 25 minutes later. Her mascara streaked dark and her eyes were red and swollen. She stood in the doorway gasping like she'd raced. After surveying us, she stated Mark drove off and didn't answer her calls. She took out her phone and called again in front of everyone. It went directly to voicemail for everyone. She had to retype since her hands were trembling while texting. She turned and stared at me with hatred. She said I damaged her marriage and children over a silly pregnancy announcement. She claimed I was horrible and terrible and would never be forgiven. Even when my mom tried to quiet her, Charlotte started screaming at me. She stated I planned this whole affair and waited for the right time to embarrass her in front of everyone. Ryan stood up and told her she started it by assaulting me. Charlotte implored him to stop and stated he turned me against my family. Now all the youngsters were sobbing, even older ones. My 12-year-old nephew lay head down on the table with his arms over it. My dad finally talked. He spoke softly but firmly, telling Charlotte to take responsibility for her actions rather than blame me for exposing them. He stated she texted Daniel and lied to Mark about it. Charlotte turned on him and said nobody realized how terrible her life was. She cried louder and slumped into a dining room chair. Her body trembled as she covered her face. My mother grabbed her shoulder. Charlotte glanced up at her and stated she'd been unhappy for years but couldn't solve it. She stated having 5 kids was tiring and Mark worked all the time, making her feel invisible. Texting Daniel helped her feel like herself again, before marriage and kids took over. She never planned to cheat and never physically did, but she understood it was wrong. Her eyes were fixed on my mother as she apologized repeatedly. My mom advised Charlotte to take the kids home and that we needed time to process. Charlotte nodded and grabbed her kids' jackets and shoes. Shaking, she stuffed her kitchenware into bags. She was ignored by her children. The 12-year-old walked his younger brother to the door by holding his hand. Charlotte never glanced at me as she left. She led her kids to her van and drove away. Megan used the broom and dustpan to sweep up the little glass shards after they departed. Ethan and I cleaned the table silently. My mom cried silently over the kitchen sink. Dad sat at the table looking blankly. Ryan carried my plates to the kitchen. The home was melancholy and heavy. Not Christmas as intended. After cleaning up, Ryan and I departed an hour later. First, the journey home was silent. About halfway through, I started bawling. I kept going. I was thinking about how I wanted this to be a nice memory of announcing our baby, but it turned out to be a disaster. Ryan took my hand while driving. He denied responsibility for Charlotte's choices. He reminded me that she'd assaulted me first, hurled a glass, and had a breakdown over my pregnancy-related silence. He argued I was entitled to protect myself after she hit me. Hard. Though I knew he was correct, I felt horrible. I kept picturing Mark's face as I described Daniel's confusion and eventual breakdown. I heard Charlotte's kids sobbing. Ryan switched off his automobile in our driveway. I cried on his shoulder while hugging him. He stated us and the baby will be okay, which was most important. Inside, I had a lengthy shower and sobbed more. Ryan poured tea and we sat on the couch. He showed a movie we didn't watch. The next morning, I checked my phone. Family members missed 20 calls. My parents, Ethan, Megan, and even distant relatives texted me. The longest text came from my mom inquiring how I knew Daniel. Calling her back immediately. She responded first ring. When Charlotte asked me to check a message while driving last month, I gave her the complete tale about seeing the text on her phone. I mentioned Daniel's name appeared with heart emoticons. When I opened it, there were dozens of months-old messages. I'd been carrying around the awareness that they were flirtatious and improper, unsure what to do. My mom moaned loudly. She stated she wished I'd informed her personally instead of publicly. I wish Charlotte hadn't yelled and smashed a glass at me for safeguarding my pregnancy announcement. My mother paused. She stated she realized I was protecting myself, but my manner did a lot of damage. Did she talk to Charlotte? She stated Charlotte phoned her hysterically around 3 a.m. She stated Mark hadn't answered Charlotte's calls and she didn't know where he went. Dad phoned me separately an hour later. He claimed he backed me and that Charlotte needed a wake-up about her actions. He stated she'd been entitled and mistreating others for years, but he concerned for Mark and the kids. He wanted to know more about Daniel than what I told him over dinner. I told him I noticed a few flirting texts, but didn't know the extent. I didn't know if they met or texted. My dad said Mark was probably trying to figure it out too. He hoped they could resolve it for the kids, but he wouldn't blame Mark if he couldn't. The mess was discussed for some time. He stated holidays should unite families, but this one had broken them apart. Before we hung up, he encouraged me to take care of myself and the baby and not allow stress ruin my pregnancy. Charlotte didn't reply for 4 days. I contacted her to check on her, but she didn't answer. Ethan phoned to say he drove by her house and saw her van, but no one answered. My mom continued phoning Charlotte scared and ill, but Charlotte only responded once to say she was all right and wanted space. On day 4, Mark answered my dad's texts. He wanted time to reflect while staying with his brother Michael. Mark declined my dad's invitation to chat. Michael contacted my dad that afternoon. Michael wanted to know what occurred at Christmas since Mark wouldn't say. My dad detailed everything. Michael heard about my pregnancy announcement, Charlotte's breakdown, the wine glass, and Daniel. Long after my dad finished, Michael was silent. He then said Mark had arrived at his home Thursday night, looking devastated, and had scarcely talked since. He stated Mark sat on his sofa viewing the TV without watching. Michael asked my dad how severe Daniel's situation was. No one knew for sure, but my dad believed Charlotte had admitted to messaging him for months. Michael warned that this might turn ugly and hoped everyone was ready. Our flat was my refuge for several days. Oliver returned to work on Monday, leaving me alone with my thoughts and my phone, which kept ringing. I ignored most. Ethan brought Chinese cuisine and entered with our extra key on Tuesday night. He placed the bags on the counter and took out plates without asking if I was hungry. I liked that he didn't overreact. He opened containers and served fried rice like any other Tuesday. While eating at the kitchen table, he informed me Charlotte had started writing odd Facebook status updates. He showed me his phone, which I read. Some stated blood doesn't necessarily imply loyalty. Another was about individuals stabbing you in the back when you least expect it. Each post had family inquiring what was happening and if she was okay. After scrolling, Ethan showed me one where our aunt asked whether it was Christmas. Charlotte replied with a sobbing emoji that certain family members had showed their real colors. Reading it made me nauseous. She made herself appear like the victim by throwing a glass and screaming at me. Ethan placed his phone aside and urged me not to let it reach me. Any rational person could see through Charlotte's charade, he claimed. But I knew it wasn't true since not everyone saw what happened. Megan texted me Wednesday afternoon. Her mother phoned that morning to discuss Christmas. Someone gave Megan's mom a twisted story. As she heard, I disclosed Charlotte's private business to shame her since I was upset she didn't know about my pregnancy first. She stated her mom inquired whether that was real. Megan told her the truth, but she wasn't sure her mom believed her. Megan was unsure who gave her mom that version, but it had to be someone from Charlotte's side because I texted back. I wanted to hurl my phone across the room in anger. Charlotte fabricated the whole story to make me appear like a monster who pursued her. She didn't tell anybody she flung a wine glass at the wall or had a breakdown at my pregnancy announcement. She didn't say she yelled at me and demanded an apology for safeguarding my news. My text to Megan said I couldn't believe Charlotte was doing this. Megan replied that half the extended family probably believed I was the terrible guy. Charlotte had always been skilled at playing victim and generating sympathy, she added. I understood that, yet it still frustrated me. Mom phoned Thursday morning. I nearly didn't answer, but I knew she'd keep calling until I did. She inquired about my health and the baby. I assured her nothing was wrong physically. She said she wanted a family gathering on Sunday after a moment of silence. She advised everyone to sit down and discuss what occurred like adults. She explicitly invited Charlotte and Mark to attend. My stomach sank. Family conflict was the last thing I wanted. I advised my mom against it since I didn't need the stress. She said she understood, but we couldn't let this fester and pull the family apart. I stated Charlotte's lies shattered things. My mom grumbled and stated that's why we needed to chat face to face. Ryan heard about it after I hung up. While filling the dishes, he looked at me. He suggested, maybe we should go so we could tell everyone our side of the story. I wasn't sure, but he warned Charlotte would control the narrative if we didn't show there. He was right. I texted my mom we'd be there. Too quick Sunday. I had a knotted tummy the whole trip to my folks' place with Ryan. We found Ethan on the couch when we entered. Megan arrived minutes later. Like every other family meeting, my dad made coffee and spread out cookies in the kitchen. Then Mark entered alone. He looked awful. He had red eyes and black circles like he hadn't slept in days. Mark showed us a text when my mom inquired where Charlotte was. It claimed she wouldn't be in my room and wouldn't talk to us. My dad shook his head and murmured. We sat in the living room and felt uneasy. No one knew how to start. Finally, Mark spoke. He confronted Charlotte about Daniel when they got home on Christmas night. Her confession was complete. Mark's voice broke as he claimed they'd texted daily for 9 months. He stated she confessed to having coffee with Daniel twice, in September and early November. My mother covered her mouth. Mark chatted. He stated Charlotte swore they never touched. Just talking, no kissing or touching. Mark didn't care because she'd been lying about her emotional affair for over a year. She said nothing physical happened, so Ethan asked Mark. No longer sure what to trust, Mark remarked. He searched her phone records and found the Daniel text from 10 or 11 months ago. He found emails Charlotte had erased but kept in her trash. Mark felt terrible reading those emails since Charlotte had been moaning about him to Daniel and that she missed their old relationship. Dad wondered what Mark would do. Mark contemplated separation. Because he felt furious and betrayed every time he saw Charlotte, he couldn't stay in the house. His brother Michael was hosting him, and he just went home after Charlotte took the kids to get additional clothes. Mark stared directly at me and inquired whether anybody else in the family knew about Daniel before Christmas. Everyone but me declined. After reading the text on her phone, I admitted I knew for a month. Mark nodded carefully, contemplating that. He didn't resent me. Despite the outcome, he thanked me for telling him. Mom spoke up. I may have handled it differently, she added. Should I have told Mark privately instead of publicly? My cheeks grew heated. Charlotte was yelling, throwing things, and demanding an apology, I informed her. I wasn't considering how to manage anything at that point. She spoiled my baby's announcement, so I defended myself. Dad came in to assist. He stated Charlotte's years of disrespecting boundaries and decisions concerning Daniel caused this predicament. I wasn't to fault for eventually confronting her, he added. My mom appeared ready to quarrel, but didn't. Ethan shifted the topic. He claimed it wasn't about the pregnancy announcement anymore. He advised Charlotte and Mark to resolve their marriage without involving us. Mark concurred. He stated he would convince Charlotte they needed marital therapy to save their relationship. He indicated he needed professional therapy since trust was damaged. After everyone gone, I was exhausted. I glanced out the window as Ryan drove us home. I received a Facebook message from a lapsed friend that evening. Simmons Nora. Our family acquaintance knew my parents for years. She wanted to contact out after hearing about Christmas. She had a similar experience with her sister 10 years earlier. Her sister had boundaries difficulties and shared Nora's intimate details with everyone. Nora takes years to learn to create and maintain limits. I could ask her for guidance. I messaged her back and we called for nearly an hour. She shared her successes, such as being clear about what information was appropriate to convey. She said that you must occasionally accept that some family members won't change and protect yourself. I felt less alone after talking to Nora. She understood in a way that others don't. 2 weeks passed. Charlotte didn't contact me then. I got updates from Mom and Ethan. Mark and Charlotte were being counseled. After Mark returned home, they slept in separate rooms. Charlotte blocked Daniel on everything and told him she was wrong and needed to focus on her marriage. I wasn't sure if Charlotte was speaking the truth. Charlotte texted me on Wednesday afternoon. It required in-person conversation alone. Reading that made my hands shake. Ryan requested to come after I showed him. I agreed immediately. I wasn't ready for Charlotte alone. Texting her back, I proposed meeting at a coffee shop near our flat. Yes, she agreed. We scheduled it for 10 o'clock Saturday morning. The night before Saturday, I hardly slept. Ryan and I arrived 15 minutes early for the coffee shop. We sat at a back corner table with my decaf coffee. Charlotte looked terrible when she arrived at 10 o'clock. She wore little makeup and an untidy ponytail. Like Mark, she had black bags under her eyes. She cried soon after sitting across from us. She said her life was falling apart. Mark hardly glanced at her, and her kids kept wondering why Daddy was sleeping in the guest room. She couldn't eat or sleep and felt insane. Then she looked at me and stated tossing the wine glass was improper. No excuse, she replied, and she was sorry. I said nothing. I waited for her next words. Charlotte cried and claimed she'd been envious of me for years. She stated I did everything easy. My work, schooling, and marriage to Ryan. Watching me excel at everything just made her feel stuck and miserable. Hearing this was unbelievable. Life had always seemed good to Charlotte. 5 kids, a great house, a hardworking spouse. I had a heartbreaking loss after 3 years of trying to become pregnant. I believed she had it all figured out while I struggled. She told me she felt confined. Mommying was all she did anymore. Though she adored her kids, she occasionally forgot who she was. She stated watching me travel for business, get out with friends, and have hobbies made her feel like she'd lose everything. She knew resenting me was terrible but couldn't help it. She dried her eyes with a tissue and stated texting Daniel reminded her of her youth and future. It was foolish and she knew it wasn't genuine, but it felt wonderful to have someone ask about her day and care about her thoughts. Ryan clasped my hand under the table. Charlotte glanced at us and apologized for tossing the glass. She apologized for spoiling my pregnancy announcement. She acknowledged her issue with seeking attention and being first. She felt significant when she shared news first. She stated her therapist was explaining why. She stated Mark demanded therapy or left. She claimed she had 4 alone sessions and couples counseling started next week. She tried to change but struggled. I pondered everything for a moment. I told her I forgave her for Christmas. I explained I understood her struggles, but she needed to respect my boundaries now. I answered that meant not disclosing my personal news without permission. I said it meant not focusing on her. Nodding, she replied, "She will try." She requested me to undergo family therapy with her. Her therapist said it may repair our relationship. I suggested taking time to work on ourselves independently. She looked content with that reply. A couple more minutes of unimportant discussion followed. Ryan and I left. Before we left, Charlotte hugged me more naturally and less performatively. In the drive, Ryan inquired how I felt. I was cautiously optimistic, yet hurt. I wanted to believe Charlotte was changing, but I'd heard promises before. He suggested taking it day by day and seeing what occurred. It exhausted me, so I napped when we came home. A few days later, my dad called to say Mark had contacted him. Mark informed my dad he and Charlotte were seeing Aaron Simmons for marriage therapy. Aaron specializes in affairs and trust issues, my dad stated. Mark had returned home but was sleeping in the guest room. He informed my dad he had stay conditions. Charlotte must be honest with Daniel about everything. She needed individual therapy. She had to limit phone and social media use. Mark looked committed to making marriage work and to his expectations, according to my dad. I was delighted Mark didn't ignore it. Charlotte needs genuine penalties. I saw my doctor 4 days following that talk. Ryan always accompanied me. The ultrasound tech measured everything and reported the baby was growing well. My doctor then tested my blood pressure. Everything looked good, she remarked. She inquired about my stress and I said family drama was hard. She claimed my prior checkup revealed I was nervous, but this appointment showed the baby was okay. She urged me to take care of myself and not allow family issues impact my health. The baby needs me to be calm and healthy, she explained. My vow was to try. Charlotte texted me that weekend. An image of paper was provided to me. Her therapist gave her homework. She had to record every time she crossed someone's boundaries and consider apologizing. I magnified the photo. My pregnancy announcement was first, but there were many others. She informed my mom about Ethan's relationship before him. She wrote about Megan's new job before she disclosed it. She announced my cousin's engagement on family chat. She notified others about my dad's health scare despite his request. The list continued. 15 instances on the first page. It wasn't only about me when I saw it written down. Charlotte has done this to everyone for years. I texted her back that I appreciated her honesty. A heart emoji returned. A week later, my frightened mom called. She said Christmas in a few weeks. She asked if we could meet without drama. I stated I didn't know but would try if everyone did. She recommended a casual meal instead of a formal one. Maybe just snacks and games at home. No frills, little pressure. I thought that was better than recreating a holiday. She said she'd ask everyone whether they agreed. A few days later, she texted our family group chat the plan. Everyone said it was okay. The next Saturday, Ethan and Megan helped us set up the nursery. Ryan had painted the walls the weekend before. Now we had to assemble furniture and organize baby things. Megan helped me fold little clothing while Ethan assembled the cot. She pulled out a onesie that read, "Mommy's Little Miracle." She joked that my baby would learn from family dysfunction stories. I laughed because it was true. When Aunt Charlotte tossed a wine glass, this youngster would hear about Christmas. Ryan delivered pizza for lunch, which we ate on the floor among boxes. Focusing on the positive instead of the turmoil felt nice. We finished the crib and dresser that day. It was starting to resemble a nursery. I got mail notice on Tuesday. I checked the mailbox and discovered a Charlotte letter. No return address, but I recognized her handwriting. While returning upstairs, I opened it. It was 2 pages. She said her therapist helped her compose it, but the words were hers. She apologized for stealing my moments. She mentioned my graduation, engagement, and promotion from years ago. She realized she did it because she felt invisible. She stated being the messenger made her feel needed. She considered it selfish and immoral. She stated she wounded me repeatedly and never apologized. She claimed she didn't want me to forgive or trust her instantly. She stated she wanted me to know she knew her mistake and why. She declared she would change despite the difficulty. The letter was excuse-free. I was delighted or didn't mean to harm you. Straightforward accountability. Ryan saw it after I read it twice. He described it as actual advancement. Although I agreed, I was still waiting for the other shoe to drop. Christmas arrived unexpectedly fast. The week prior, my mom called to see if everyone still wanted a casual gathering. Yes, I asked if Charlotte would come. Charlotte confirmed her family's attendance and appeared thrilled, according to my mom. I was frightened, yet intrigued if the changes were permanent. Ryan reminded me we didn't have to remain if it was unpleasant. If Charlotte played her old self, we could go early. My dad texted me on Christmas Eve that he'd talked to Mark the night before. Mark said marital counseling was improving their communication for the first time in years. He stated Charlotte let him know everything on her phone. Daniel was blacklisted on all social media and chat applications. Before barring him, she emailed Daniel that she was foolish to talk to him and needed to restore her marriage. My dad claimed Mark appeared cautiously optimistic about a resolution. I replied back to ask if Charlotte would keep it up or if it was temporary. My dad claimed time would tell, but he'd never seen her accept responsibility. Ethan was setting up appetizers when we got at my parents' place at midday. Megan arrived with a homemade cheese board after us. Instead of tense like Christmas, the atmosphere was calm. My parents set up board and card games on the coffee table. This wasn't about a nice meal or flawless decor, she said. Charlotte, Mark, and the kids arrived about 1. I saw her enter with a casserole and wrapped gift. She waved at me across the room. Not the forceful embrace she typically gave. A basic wave. She put her stuff down and joined Ryan and me by the fireplace. She inquired about my health and pregnancy. I replied the infant was healthy and fine. She smiled and said she was thrilled for us. Instead of dominating the conversation, she left to help my mom in the kitchen. Ryan lifted his eyebrows as if he knew what I was thinking. It was different. Charlotte surprised me all afternoon. She let Ethan tell his humorous work anecdote instead of interrupting. When Megan discussed considering a puppy, Charlotte answered questions rather than providing advice. Charlotte didn't provide her 5 pregnancies advice when my dad inquired how I was handling my pregnancy symptoms. She was present but not overbearing. She participated without leading. Charlotte smiled at jokes and appeared calm throughout a few rounds of cards. Her kids played with toys while she didn't hover or try to be a great mom. Mark was more relaxed than in months. He grinned when Charlotte joked about her bad hand. Charlotte brought me a wrapped package from her luggage before supper. She wanted me to enjoy it for the baby. Opening it revealed a handmade baby blanket with stars and moons woven in. It was gorgeous and certainly time-consuming. I thanked her and she said she'd been working on it in her leisure time for weeks. She didn't declare it or grab attention. She softly delivered it to me and appeared thrilled when I replied it was great. My mom took me into the kitchen as everyone cleaned up after supper. She hugged me and said, "Thank you for giving Charlotte another chance." She saw actual improvements in her daughter and valued having both children get along again. I assured my mom I was careful, but Charlotte seemed different today. My mom prayed for this and saw Charlotte work on herself, giving her hope. I was hopeful, but I needed to see if Charlotte could sustain it. Mom agreed and felt that was reasonable. To finish the night, we played games and spoke in the living room. Charlotte stayed until 8 o'clock, then told her kids to go home for bed. She hugged everyone farewell, even myself. A typical sister hug. Not too lengthy or tight. She went with her family after telling me to text her if required. Ethan came over and sought my opinion after they left. Charlotte's behavior was so strange that I didn't sure what to believe. Maybe the Christmas catastrophe changed her, he remarked. Megan joined us and said she was amazed that Charlotte didn't promote herself all day. Ryan said it was progress, but caution was needed. I concurred. One nice day didn't erase years of boundary stomping, but it started. My phone rang the first week of January with an unfamiliar number. Something compelled me to answer. It was Charlotte. She said she was phoning from her therapist's office because Aaron wanted me to attend one of their sessions. He felt a specialist might help us discuss our relationship concerns. I felt sick thinking about sitting in therapy with Charlotte, but then I thought of my kid and how I wanted them to know their aunt and cousins. I asked Charlotte if she wanted this or if Aaron made her. She wanted to try because she missed me as her sister. I told her I needed to consider and consult Ryan. She replied that was okay, and to inform her. Ryan at work was my first call after hanging up. He indicated it was my decision, but he believed a neutral person would keep the conversation fruitful. Megan told me the same thing that night. Ethan indicated he'd back my decision. I texted Charlotte after 2 days of deliberation that I'd attend one session. After thanking me, she stated Aaron's office will call me to schedule. I discovered the appropriate number in a modest office building 4 days later. Charlotte was nervously waiting in the waiting area. I sat across from her after a feeble grin. Neither of us spoke while waiting. A 40-year-old man with spectacles emerged from a door. Aaron introduced himself and shook my hand. He walked us into his office and put us on opposing couches. Aaron thanked me for coming from a chair facing us. He stated today was about opening communication and making sure we both felt heard. He asked me to describe how Charlotte's actions throughout the years affected me. I inhaled and claimed it made me doubt her with my most vital matters. Every time I did well, Mom had to tell everyone first. It made my successes seem like hers. The pregnancy announcement was the final straw since I'd lost one kid and needed to safeguard this one. Erin nodded and asked Charlotte if she understood. Charlotte agreed despite her cries. She stated she was too focused on how being the messenger made her feel important to consider how her actions affected me. Erin urged her to elaborate. Charlotte often felt invisible throughout her life. Despite having 5 children and a spouse, she felt adrift. She felt important when she shared others' news. Now she recognized it was selfish and immoral. Hearing her say this made me emotional. Erin inquired how I felt hearing Charlotte's explanation. Though it helped me comprehend her actions, it didn't alleviate the anguish. Charlotte nodded and stated she wasn't having me forget everything. She wanted a chance to improve. Erin suggested starting there and asked if we were willing to re-establish trust. Both agreed. I practiced conversing without patterns with Erin in therapy and Charlotte over coffee for the following few weeks. She tried hard to listen instead of waiting to speak. Ryan noticed a change in her behavior around me. I felt the baby move and my tummy grew every day. I received a morning text from Charlotte wanting to visit that afternoon. I agreed, and she arrived at 2 with containers. She delivered frozen foods she made all morning, such casseroles, soups, and spaghetti with cooking instructions. She wanted to help once the baby was born and thought ready-made dinners would help. She did it without having to, which astonished and touched me. I told her I wasn't sure what else I needed because this was new to me. She stated to contact her anytime and didn't expect to be in the delivery room. Her goal was to help however I was comfortable. I thanked her and she departed after 30 minutes. Ryan returned from work to find all the food frozen. He stated Charlotte worked hard and it showed. I felt strange cramps on the sofa watching TV 2 weeks later on a Tuesday night. Water ran down my legs when I stood up. My water broke in the living room. Ryan came hurrying from the bedroom when I called. He assisted me to the vehicle with the hospital bag we packed weeks before. As the contractions got harder on the drive, I breathed through them as in birthing class. Ryan contacted my parents from the car to say we were going to the hospital. My mom inquired if she should inform Charlotte. Even though we weren't close anymore, I wanted her to know she was my sister. Ryan left me down at the emergency door and walked to the park while a nurse wheeled me. They put me in a room for labor and delivery. I was 5 centimeters when the doctor checked me. I wanted an epidural since the contractions started becoming harder. After the anesthesiologist inserted the needle, the agony subsided after 20 minutes. Ryan waited with me, holding my hand. Parents arrived about 10 o'clock and sat with us. My mom told me I was doing well and my dad seemed anxious. Long hours of labor. I was fatigued and wanted it to end. After monitoring my progress, the doctor indicated I was ready to push at 8 the next morning. Ryan guided my pushes from beside me. I heard sobbing and the doctor stated it was a girl after what seemed like forever. Her placement on my chest was excellent. Small and pink with thick dark hair. Ryan and I cried because she was finally here. She was washed and weighed by nurses. 8 pounds 1 ounce. I glanced at her face as they returned her covered in a blanket. My parents met their grandchild first. My mom sobbed and hugged her as my dad snapped 100 photos. They left after an hour to recover. Next came Ethan and Megan with flowers and a cuddly giraffe. Megan held the infant and praised her. After being afraid, Ethan held her and grinned the whole time. About 30 minutes later, they departed. Charlotte and Mark arrived last with a large present bag. She approached my bed and requested to hold her niece. I agreed and gave her the baby. Charlotte's face melted staring down. She muttered that she was lovely, as tears fell from her cheeks. She said I would be a great mom. She gave the baby back after 20 minutes and told us to rest. I liked how she handled leaving with Mark. She followed limits without being reminded. My first weeks back home were harder than imagined. The baby wailed constantly, so I barely slept. Ryan did his best, but he had to return to work after 3 weeks. Charlotte texted every couple days to check in. She volunteered to deliver groceries or keep the baby so I could snooze. She didn't just appear. She came over after I said sure. I texted her to hold the baby for an hour one afternoon since I was too weary to think. She arrived in 15 minutes. She rocked the baby downstairs while I slept upstairs. Felt much better this morning. She folded my clothing and did my dishes. Her response to my thanks was, "That's what sisters do." It felt strange. She helped because I asked, not for credit. The pediatrician reported the infant was healthy and gaining weight at 2 months. She stated I was a good first-time mom. Ryan and I were establishing a routine. We know her screams and feeding and sleeping times. Family support made it simpler. My mom visited weekly to relieve me. Sometimes Ethan brought dinner. Charlotte checked in often but never insisted on coming over if I was busy. The family was more courteous and supportive than usual. The infant was 12 weeks old when Charlotte and I had coffee. We sat outdoors at my neighborhood cafe. Therapy was helping her understand herself, she said. She realized she lost herself in becoming a wife and mother. She started Saturday morning community center art lessons. Her book group met twice a month. She was finding happiness beyond her family. She appeared lighter, less needy for approval. I admired her art. My dad informed Ryan one night that Mark said their marriage was better than in years. Mark stated he and Charlotte were finally honest. No longer were they only acting. The Daniel situation prompted them to face long-ignored issues. Mark was glad they could repair instead of letting everything fall apart. Charlotte was honest about her phone and schedule. She was trying to reassure Mark. It worked. Everyone came for supper on the baby's 4-month birthday. Simple pizza with salad. My parents, Ethan, Megan, and Charlotte's relatives came. Adults spoke while kids played in the backyard. Charlotte arranged the table and kept the youngsters calm. She congratulated Megan on her hairstyle and questioned Ethan about work. She wasn't self-centered. She seems genuinely interested in others. She played with the baby but gave her back when she fussed instead of trying to quiet her. Without conflict, everyone got along. Never before had our family reunions seemed so tranquil. After everyone departed, I rocked the baby in the nursery. She almost fell asleep in my arms. I remembered how awful Christmas was. The yelling, shattered glass, and damaged sentiments led to actual change. With support, Charlotte restored her marriage. We improved communication. All started respecting limits. The family was healthier than in years. I was glad my kid would see her aunt as a person who was growing and improving, not as someone who needed to be the focus of attention. I was glad we got here, even if it was filthy and terrible. I put the sleeping infant in the crib. I watched her breathe for a while before walking downstairs to Ryan.